Chapter 482. Although Jindao cult ranked at the bottom of the 25 sects, it was also one of the 25 sects, and its strength should not be underestimated. In the afternoon of the same day, Ling Qinglan secretly went to Jindao cult to investigate the situation, while Su Chinka stayed in the Su family to prevent the base camp from being invaded. "Master, are you going to deal with Jindao cult?" On the second day, Su Yang and Su Mu, who hadn't shown up for a long time, suddenly came. As soon as they met, Su Yang frowned and asked anxiously, "Why? Can't I?" Su Li looked at Su Yang and raised her eyebrows slightly. A pressure came out of nowhere. "Of course, Master." Su Yang's forehead was sweating, and his doubts and anxiety were instantly replaced by a kind of emotion called cowardice. Su Mu saw Su Yang's unbearable look. He shook his head slightly and said, "Master, Tianhe's sect sent a message to us yesterday, asking what happened in the Su family. The news of Su Zhuanyan's death seems to have spread." Su Li slightly pursed her lips and said lightly, "It's not surprising. After a few months, Su Chinka has made a lot of moves, and Jindao cult has been keeping an eye on it. If the news of Su Zhuanyan's death doesn't spread, I will feel strange." As soon as these words came out, both Su Yang and Su Mu were shocked. Su Zhuanyan really died in the hands of Su Jiuzhou. Even though the two of them had guessed it when Su Chinka cleared the Su family in a bloody way and deliberately let them go, they were still shocked when they heard the news. Although they had never been qualified to see Su Zhuanyan with their own eyes, he was also a mighty figure in nature's test. Even in Tianhe sect, he was definitely a mainstay. In the era of no war, few people died. Tut! Su Yang couldn't help but be speechless. A few months ago, a grand elder of Junior Emperor died in Han sect. Not long after, another mighty in nature's test died. Qingshui circle is really getting more and more chaotic. He sighed with emotion and asked cautiously, "Master, how should we reply to the inquiry of Tianhe sect?" Su Li looked at Su Yang until the latter's hair stood up. Then she turned her gaze and said indifferently, "Don't let any holy sects come to Jiuzhou region within 10 years. Su Yang's pupils shrank, and his heart trembled slightly. Although he wanted to ask Su Jiuzhou why she did this, his reason and desire to survive still stopped him. In the end, he just nodded. Su Mu frowned and said hesitantly, "Master, since Tianhe sect can send us to lurk in sects in Jiuzhou region, other holy sects are likely to place spies in other sections. If you want to deal with Jindao cult and don't want to spread the news, I'm afraid." Su Li was stunned for a moment. Then she gently nodded and said, "You are right. It seems that my plan needs to be changed. You two have been in Jiuzhou region for many years. Have you contacted other holy sect spies?" Su Yang's expression was slightly stiff. He subconsciously wanted to deny it, but Su Mu nodded and admitted it without hesitation, as if he was waiting for Su Li's question. "Very good." Su Li glanced at Su Yang, who looked uneasy, and revealed a meaningful smile. She said softly, "The matter of the Su family has been settled. You don't have to stay in the Su family anymore. In the next year. I don't care what you do, try to find out the specific identity of those spies and report it to me. Can you do it?" Su Mu's expression was solemn. He stood straight and his voice resounded. "I will live up to your expectations." "Ha!" Su Li laughed softly and waved her hand. Then her figure shattered and disappeared like a bubble. "Blockhead?" After Su Li left, Su Yang immediately wanted to ask, but Su Mu reached out to cover his mouth. Seeing Su Mu shook his head seriously, Su Yang was a little confused. He didn't understand why Su Mu had to listen to Su Jiuzhou. Obviously, it was not necessary. Although the two of them became traitors and joined Su Jiuzhou, it was just an expedient strategy to survive in the chaos zone. Did this blockhead take it seriously? "Let's go. Since Master said so, we will set off immediately." Su Mu glanced at the direction where Su Li left. He picked up Su Yang's back with one hand and left the second branch in a few flashes. Shortly after the two of them left, Su Chinka, who was hiding in the dark, appeared and calmly dispelled the gesture in his hand. Su Mu flew all the way with Su Yang until they landed on a flat plain. With a gloomy face, Su Yang broke away from Su Mu's hand and scolded angrily, "Blockhead, have you been kicked in the head by a donkey? You even told Su Jojo about your past. What kind of magic potion did Su Jojo give you to make you answer every question? If she asks about us, are you going to shut up?" The anger in Su Mu's eyes flashed away, and he stopped Su Yang from saying the second half of the sentence. "Well, I'd like to hear what reason you can make up this time to convince me." Su Yang took a deep breath, crossed his hands in front of his chest, and stared at Su Mu with bulging eyes. It seemed that he would part ways if Su Mu didn't agree with him. Su Jojo wants to unify the Jojo region. Su Mu's eyes flickered, and the first sentence made Su Yang's expression change dramatically. "What?" Su Mu raised his head and squinted at Su Yang. "She doesn't mean to deliberately hide it from us, but she wants to hide it from holy sects. If we want to leave, we can imagine the consequences." Su Yang reached out to cover his chest, which was faintly suffocating, and his face was full of disbelief. "How is this possible? Su Jojo's Ni sect is just a small sect. Based on those repulsive people, now, the Su family also belongs to Su Jojo." Su Mu interjected leisurely, and Su Yang suddenly stopped talking. "Even if Su Jojo's next goal is Jindao cult, how do you know that she wants to control the Jojo region? Maybe she just wants to avenge Su Daiyin. After all, her relationship with Su Daiyin." Speaking of this, Su Yang froze, and his voice stopped abruptly. He suddenly remembered that the relationship between Su Jojo and Su Daiyin was simply planned by Su Jojo. Could there be feelings in such a relationship? Seeing that he finally understood, Su Mu continued, "If we refuse, Su Chinka will immediately kill us in the cradle. Maybe she won't kill in order not to alarm Tianhe sect, but, do you want to be like Su Chinka?" Su Yang couldn't help but shiver and immediately shook his head. "So, we have no choice. It turns out to be like this." Su Yang looked at the Jinwu in the sky, which was not very bright, and suddenly turned back with a pale smile. "Su Mu, my brain is really not as good as yours. Do you particularly dislike me? If not." Su Mu's cold face showed a slight fluctuation, but it soon calmed down, just like a leaf thrown into a calm lake, which only caused a ripple. But there was something more in the lake after all. "I never dislike you. I just want to kill you. So, the stupider you are, the better." After Su Mu finished speaking, he turned around and left. Su Yang laughed, "So? I'm relieved." Hearing him laughing behind, Su Mu raised his lips imperceptibly, but it was soon replaced by coldness. There was one more thing that he hid from Su Yang. Although it was his guess, he dared not tell anyone. The will of ice that he understood was extremely sensitive to some things, such as, the ice demon that made a big scene in the ghost region. On a green grassland by the lake in the back mountain of Ni sect, Su Li lay down and stared at the blue sky in a daze. The little white fox squinted and took a nap beside her. It made a murmur from time to time, as if it was dreaming. The little black cat, which was transformed by the nightmare, stared at the little white fox and kept devouring dreams with a satisfied face. It enjoyed itself very much. Su Li suddenly felt a little sleepy when the warm but indescribable sunshine shone on her. With her physique, she would definitely not be affected by the light, but she was intoxicated by herself. These days, she broke into the ghost region, entered the ancestral land of the ghost clan, and killed the grand elder of Han's sect and the mighty demon Zisha. Although she gained a lot, she was too nervous. She needed to rest before fighting against the 25 sections. Even if it was only for a moment. She squinted and looked at the lush mountains, rivers and forests in the distance, and gradually fell asleep. After a long time, the approaching breath of Hua Yen woke her up. Didn't she dream? She straightened up and looked at the innocent nightmare beside her. She looked slightly serious. Black, you are a good girl, right? The little body of the nightmare shivered. It opened its mouth aggrievedly and spat out a ball. Su Li took the dream ball with a smile. This little guy became bold and even dared to devour her dream. Su Li. You are here. I have been looking for you for a long time. At this moment, Hua Yan came in a hurry, and her breath was a little unstable. When she saw Su Li lying comfortably on the grass, she couldn't help but be amused. She pretended to be angry and said, "Wow. I am running around for you outside, but you are lazing around here." After a while, Hua Yan's smile disappeared, but there was still a smile in her eyes. The spy of Jindao cult has news. Oh, so fast? Su Li said in surprise. She originally thought that if she couldn't find the spy in Jindao cult, she would go to Jindao cult in person, but now it was not necessary. Yes. Hua Yan nodded and said, "It's a coincidence that the spy in Jindao cult has some relationship with Yan Zai." Yan Zai went to investigate a little and recognized the person. Is he from Void Sword sect? Su Li rubbed the surface of Black Lotus ring, and thought about it. In the previous life, she died very cleanly, and the reincarnation mirror had been completely destroyed. Why did those holy sects still put spies in these small sects? Was it possible that someone already knew that she was still alive? As soon as this speculation appeared, Su Li shook her head and extinguished it. It was impossible. If they knew that she was reborn, they would not be so calm now. That is, someone predicted that something noteworthy would happen in Jojo region, but they didn't know it was me. Or could it be, that the thing that people care about isn't me? All kinds of thoughts hovered in Su Li's mind. Hua Yan stood aside and did not disturb her. Instead, she looked at Su Li's beautiful face in contemplation with a smile on her face. If she could, she would rather practice quietly with Su Li all the time, but she also knew very well that it was impossible. It was too unfair for Su Li to give up hatred. Chapter 483. Senior Fellow Apprentice Yen, it's really you. In an inn in a small cultivation town at the foot of the Jindao cult, Yan Shishuan looked at Yan Zai with surprise in his eyes. He had lurked in the Jindao cult for thousands of years. As a price, the Void Sword sect also let him enter the reincarnation mirror and got a good opportunity. But after all, he was not a genius cultivated by the Void Sword sect. On the day when the reincarnation mirror was broken, no one saved him. All the memories of what happened in the reincarnation mirror had long disappeared, and only some mental methods he learned in the reincarnation mirror were left in his mind. Naturally, he didn't remember that the role he played in the reincarnation mirror would be Yan Zai's father, the governor of Dahan country and the governor of Qinghe province. He only remembered that Yan Zai was famous and talented in the Void Sword sect. As long as it was a disciple in the sect, there was not a single one who did not admire him. He was even sure that Yan Zai would be the next sect master. But no one expected that Yan Zai disappeared soon after he came back from the reincarnation mirror. Yan Zai saw Yan Shishuan's surprised expression, and his expression was quite strange. Although he knew that many things happened in the reincarnation mirror were illusions, he still couldn't ignore it. Senior Fellow Apprentice, where have you been all these years? Yan Shishuan looked at Yan Zai as if he had found someone to talk to. His aloofness as an elder of the Jindao cult all turned into loneliness. I haven't returned to the sect for hundreds of years. I don't know if my old friends still remember me. Yan Zai's eyes flashed, and he didn't answer his words. He said slowly, in the eyes of those friends, you died 1,000 years ago. What? Yan Shishuan's mind suddenly shook, and his pupils shrank. Why? Yan Zai shook his head and smiled self-mockingly. For the sect, what are we? Even if it's me, if I can't become a junior emperor, I'm just a tool that can be thrown away at will. These, you have been cultivating for many years, and you should know. It turns out that, it's like this. Yan Shishuan looked more lonely, and the brilliance in his eyes because of meeting Yan Zai disappeared at this moment. Yan Zai looked at Yan Shishuan in silence. Although he was suspected of instigating defection, what he said was the truth. Those who were sent out by the Void Sword sect as spies would not end up well. The various benefits promised by the sect were just an illusion. Those who could really get that huge reward were very few. For people like Yan Shishuan who had been wandering outside for thousands of years, the higher-ups of the sect had long since lost trust in them. Even if they occasionally obtained information from them, they would join forces with other spies to repeatedly verify its authenticity. Hee. Yan Shishuan shook the wine glass in his hand and suddenly laughed in a low voice. His voice sounded like sand, extremely sour. In the cultivation world, favors are the most valuable, but also the least valuable. I'm afraid that those who still remember me, Yan Shishuan, can be counted with one hand. When Yan Zai heard this, he knew it was time. He pretended to be hesitant and said, "Do you want to go back and take a look?" Yan Shishuan was instantly stunned, and then his expression changed. "Senior brother. Do you have a way?" Yan Zai nodded with a smile, but then shook his head. "My identity is sensitive, so it's not good for me to take you back. However, there is an opportunity right now. If you seize it, you may be able to break through the shackles of the Void Sword sect and get a brighter path of cultivation." Yan Shishuan's face changed slightly. Senior brother, he was not a fool to be a spy in other sects for so many years without being discovered. The meaning of Yan Zai's words made him shudder. Betray the sect? Don't worry. Yan Zai pressed Yan Shishuan's trembling hands. You and I have the same surname, and I won't hurt you. I won't let you risk doing anything. As long as you do your part, leave the rest to me, your senior brother. My part? Yan Shishuan's eyes were full of hesitation, but Yan Zai was not annoyed. He smiled lightly and pointed to the Jindao school. It's easy for you. Yan Shishuan looked at the gate of the Jindao school in a daze. He still did not understand, but he soon understood. Bang! A purple streamer fell from the sky and slammed into the big tactical matrix for the protection of the Jindao school. Until the plaque of the main hall of the Jindao school was smashed into pieces, the original shape was revealed, a purple dagger. What's that? The main hall of our sect was smashed. What? Senior fellow apprentice, come out quickly. Something big happened. A huge roar resounded through the mountains. The main hall was destroyed, and all the disciples of the Jindao school were rioting. Not long after, Jin Jintian, the master of the Jindao school, flew out of the main hall aggressively with all the elders. Who dares to be presumptuous in my Jindao school? As soon as he finished speaking, a sweet female voice with a sneer sounded, It's me. The wind was dancing in the nothingness, and Su Dian's skirt was rustling. Her phoenix eyes were as cold as a knife, and her face was cold. Ling Qinglan followed her silently, keeping a low profile. It's you. Seeing Su Dian, Jin Jintian's eyes changed. The moment he opened his mouth, the sound waves turned into illusory golden knives and slashed at the nothingness. Judging from his action, he actually wanted to kill Su Dian immediately so that she had no chance to speak. Su Dian was not panicked, but smiled. First uncle, are you so eager to let your niece die? While speaking, Ling Qinglan raised his head, revealing a plain face. He just took a step forward and waved his sleeve. Ding! 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 Those incomparably sharp golden sabers were like eggs hitting a rock, collapsing one after another. Seeing this scene, both Jin Jintian and other elders of the Jindao school showed a look of horror. This person was definitely not in the Huashan realm. Didn't Jin Jintian say that after Su Zhuanyan, the Su family would have no backer? Why did a mighty in nature's test come out and protect Su Dian? For a time, the elders panicked, but only an old man in a dark gray robe frowned tightly. He stared at Jin Jintian and questioned, She called you first uncle. Is she Qing Ao's daughter? Jin Jintian looked at Ling Qinglan who looked indifferent, and his forehead was sweating. When he heard the old man's question, his face became even more ugly. He braced himself and said, Uncle, don't listen to this demon girl's nonsense. If I have a daughter, how can I let her be stranded outside? Ho ho ho, seeing Jin Jintian's sophistry, Su Daiyin suddenly chuckled and said sarcastically, "Old man, what first uncle said is right." After he learned that I was stranded outside, he couldn't wait to send someone with a knife to get close to me. "You are the head of the second branch of the Su family, Su Daiyin." An elder didn't know the truth and recognized Su Daiyin's identity. He immediately shouted coldly, "Su Daiyin, do you forget that the 25 sects in the Jojo region can't kill each other? Otherwise, it will cause all sects to attack together." Jin Jintian was suddenly refreshed when he heard the words. He bowed to Ling Qinglan and said eloquently, "Senior, although I don't know what Su Daiyin promised you to make you help her like this, the iron law of the Jojo region can't be broken. If you insist on harming my sect, even with your cultivation, you will be doomed. Think twice." Jin Jintian said while observing Ling Qinglan's reaction, hoping to see some information from his face, but he was disappointed. Ling Qinglan was always expressionless as if he didn't hear what he said. Su Daiyin saw that Jin Jintian was still struggling, and she couldn't help but laugh very happily. "I have been wandering outside since I was a child, fighting for food with wild dogs and clothes with beggars. If it weren't for my adoptive mother's kindness, there would be no Su Daiyin today. In recent days, there have been some changes in the Su family, which have nothing to do with my second branch. But I didn't expect that someone would take the opportunity to assassinate me. Thanks to this stab, I understand that my revenge has not been avenged. Jin Jintian, don't you want to get my father's practice method? I'll let you broaden your horizons." At the end of her words, Su Daiyin's face was suddenly full of killing intent. She pinched a gesture that made Ling Qinglan's face change abruptly. "Go to hell." Swish. 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 3 flying swords shot out from the universe ring and rushed to Jin Jintian. Jin Jintian immediately took out a bell-shaped magic weapon to block the flying swords, but his face was much worse than if he didn't block the swords. The AO sword skills that he had been looking for was actually in the hands of Su Daiyin, and it was exposed at this moment. AO sword skills of Cheng, AO, this child, the elder in grey robe looked at Su Daiyin who was full of killing intent. His lips trembled violently, and his old eyes were instantly wet. "My granddaughter is still alive. This is the AO sword skills of the former lord. She is really the daughter of the lord." Many elders who didn't know were also shocked. The AO sword skills was the trump card of the former lord. The sword moves were strange and unpredictable. Every time it was used, there would be blood. But since the inexplicable death of the former lord, this sword's skills had also been lost. Although Jin Jintian was Jin Cheng, Ao's brother, he did not inherit this sword skills. No one knew where the sword skills went. But today, there was finally an answer. And this answer was very unusual. For a time, many people looked at Jin Jintian in a strange way, and even many people distanced themselves from him and disassociated themselves from him. Others who did not disassociate themselves from Jin Jintian rolled their eyes and seemed to be looking for an escape route. Jin Jintian also wanted to escape, but the middle-aged man in linen with an ordinary face gave him too much pressure. He could barely resist the sword light that Su Daiyin constantly shot at him, but he could not take another step. However, even though he managed to defend the front, he was still able to release a cold sword beside him. Puff! The elder in grey robe fiercely inserted the flying sword into Jin Jintian's heart. His turbid old eyes were full of red, as if blood was about to drip out. "You killed my daughter and your brother. Bastard, give me your life." Jin Jintian's eyes widened, and his blood splashed. He held the flying sword in his chest tightly, but the elder in grey robe put more strength in his hand. Su Daiyin saw the opportunity. She pointed with her fingertips, and a golden light broke the gap of the round bell and inserted into Jin Jintian's throat. Whoosh! Blood gushed out like a fountain. Ho ho! I'm not reconciled. Jin Jintian covered his neck, and his body softened. He never expected that his momentary greed would bear such a consequence. Chapter 484. Clatter. Ling Qinglan frowned and loosened the invisible bondage, letting Jin Jintian's corpse fall in the square in front of the main hall of Jindao cult. The disciples who heard the noise and came over saw the corpse of their lord. They instantly retreated far away and formed a large circle around the corpse. It was silent. The old man in a gray robe didn't look at Jin Jintian. He trembled and walked to Su Dayin. His wrinkled face was complicated. His lips were humming, but his voice was choked in his throat. He couldn't say anything. Uncle Lan, Su Dayin looked at Ling Qinglan. Since she learned Ling Qinglan's real name last time, she naturally changed her address. Even though Ling Qinglan had thousands of doubts in his heart at the moment, the old man in a gray robe was Su Dayin's grandfather. He didn't want to disturb his relatives when they met. Thinking of this, he retreated to the side with a heavy heart. He kept recalling the scene of Su Dayin performing the AO sword skills just now. He was absent-minded, but he didn't find that Jin Jintian's corpse below suddenly trembled slightly. Then an invisible transparent soul rose from the corpse and turned into a flowing light. It flew out of the Jindao cult quietly. Porcelain method. It actually works. God doesn't want me to die. In the flight, Jin Jintian's consciousness woke up. Seeing the state at this time, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. As long as his soul was still there, it was possible to practice again. Su Dayin, you wait for me. If I don't avenge this, I swear not to be a man. Jin Jintian's transparent face looked ferocious. He controlled the soul to fly into the air. At this moment, a pair of white hands suddenly appeared. They easily passed through the space and grabbed Jin Jintian's soul. Then they pinched it out. Green smoke curled up. Ah! The harsh scream echoed in her ears, but Su Li didn't seem to feel it. Jin Jintian and Jin Cheng, AO are brothers. It turns out that the inheritance of the AO sword skills I snatched in the reincarnation mirror is rooted here. Jin Cheng, AO's daughter, is under my command. Su Li showed a touch of interest. It was a coincidence, but it didn't surprise her. At that time, there were 100,000 practitioners who entered the reincarnation mirror. Although more than half of them died 1,000 years ago, those who stayed became the mainstay of various sections. As long as she wanted to get to the bottom of it, she would constantly meet those familiar but strange old friends, which was unavoidable. Jin Jintian and Jin Cheng, AO were just the most ordinary ones among those people. However, the porcelain method mentioned by Jin Jintian aroused a little interest in her. Even though ordinary soul formation cultivators had formed their primordial spirits and were protected by the power of intent realm, their primordial spirits were still too weak compared to their physical bodies. If the physical body was destroyed, the primordial spirit would not be able to hide and would collapse along with the physical body. However, Jin Jintian was different. He could actually regenerate his soul from his primordial spirit and escape without anyone noticing. If it weren't for the fact that he was guarding outside and his divine sense had keenly sensed the fluctuation, perhaps Jin Jintian would have really escaped and escaped. Senior Ling, please bring back Jin Jintian's corpse. Ling Qinglan suddenly heard Su Li's voice transmission, and his thoughts were suddenly interrupted. He looked at Jin Jintian's corpse that was completely silent below and wondered why Su Li still wanted the corpse. But at this moment, he didn't have much time to think about it. He just fell down and took back the spiritual dagger that was smashed into the hall. Then he put Jin Jintian's corpse into the universe ring. This action immediately aroused the dissatisfaction of the people of Jindao cult. The old man in a gray robe immediately flew over and cupped his fists. Fellow practitioner, I am Mo Lin. I am Dayin's grandfather. Thanks to your care and protection over the years, Dayin can grow up safely. But, let me be thick-skinned and say that although this beast makes me want to cut him into pieces, he is the former head of Jindao cult after all. If you collect his corpse. Ling Qinglan's eyes were cold, and Su Dayin knew something was wrong. She quickly said, Uncle Lan, don't be impatient. My grandfather is also for the reputation of Jindao cult, so, seeing Su Daiyin, Ling Qinglan's expression eased a little, but his voice was still very cold. The corpse will be returned in a few days. I just collected on behalf of Daiyin to pay tribute to her parents and Su Wenbing. At the same time, he transmitted the sound to Su Daiyin. Su Jouzhou wants this corpse. I'm afraid there is something strange about it. Su Daiyin was stunned. She suddenly fell silent and stopped persuading. Mo Lin was old and shrewd, and he also saw some clues. His old face immediately eased, and he no longer insisted. In this case, it is reasonable. Fellow practitioner, you don't have to worry about it. He could see that it was absolutely impossible to ask this person to hand over Jin Jintian's corpse. He wanted the corpse back for the sake of the face of Jindao cult. Now Ling Qinglan could put down his pride to explain, which was a great show of respect. After all, this was a mighty practitioner in nature's test. Their Jindao cult didn't have one, and it had always been ranked at the bottom of the 25 sections. Now Su Daiyin decided to return to Jindao cult as the head of Jindao cult. Maybe he could still take advantage of her. Mo Lin's mind became active, and the more he thought about it, the brighter the future was. Jin Jintian died so well. Shixuan, as you can see, what happened in Jindao cult is just a family feud. What happened in the Jindao gate is just a family grudge. You only need to report it to the sect, and you won't be punished. In the square of the main hall below, Yan Zai said with a smile. Yan Shixuan looked at the sky above the sect in a daze. In just half a day, Jindao cult had changed, and even the head of the sect had changed. If Yan Zai didn't come to him, he might still think that things were as he saw, but now, he seemed to see a huge whirlpool, and he was caught in it. Thinking that he had been struggling alone in Jindao cult all these years, and Void Sword sect had no intention to have any relationship with him, and even turned him into a dead man, he took a deep breath and looked at Yan Zai. Senior fellow apprentice, what do I need to pay attention to? Yan Zai suddenly smiled when he heard the words, and pointed to Ling Qinglan. Su Daiyin recognized her ancestors and returned to the sect. Jin Jintian died in Mo Lin's sneak attack. As for this person, don't appear in your report. Of course, there is also me. Yan Shixuan felt cold in his heart. Senior fellow apprentice, for whom are you? Yan Zai's smile faded slightly. Do you really want to know? Yan Shixuan opened his mouth, but he couldn't say anything. In the past years, could anyone who went against the holy sects have a good end? Don't worry. There is still a long time. Think about it. Yan Zai saw his hesitation, and immediately chuckled and patted him on the shoulder. This time, I will do you a little favor. If the sect investigates in the future, you can also blame it on negligence. Don't worry. Yan Shixuan breathed a sigh of relief when he heard this sentence, and nodded. A few days later, on the punishment platform of Jindao cult, heads rolled, and blood stained the ground. Su Daiyin looked cold and ferocious, but her eyes were full of tears. These elders who had conspired with Jin Jintian to kill her parents were finally sent to the netherworld by her own hands. Half a month later, the storm of Jindao cult completely subsided under Su Li's deliberate control. Jindao cult also returned to the right track under the management of Su Daiyin. However, the news that Jindao cult changed its head quickly spread to the ears of every lord of the 25 sects as if it had wings. What's wrong with Jouzhou region recently? First, the old grand elder of Su family died inexplicably, and then Jin Jintian also died unluckily. It's really unlucky. Tut, these two facts can be summed up as one thing. Su Daiyin was originally a member of Jindao cult. If Jin Jintian hadn't been greedy, he wouldn't have suffered today. I think it's weird. It's not as simple as we think. Yes, we must send someone to investigate. How can there be so many conspiracies? Those holy sects are much more well-informed than us. Even they didn't take any action, so there must be nothing serious. Many high-level officials of the 25 sects insisted on their own opinions. Although most people felt that this matter didn't need to be concerned, Hua Yan clearly noticed that there were more spies in Su family and Jindao cult. Fortunately, Su Li had already told them not to make any big moves recently. After those spies were restless for dozens of days, their enthusiasm almost subsided and they left one after another. At this moment, in the adytum of the back mountain of Ni sect, Su Li closed a booklet made of unknown materials and was lost in thought. Then in the faint light, she could vaguely see the words, porcelain method, printed on the booklet. This booklet was made of golden silk with a history of no more than 1,000 years. The escape method described in it should be based on the reincarnation mirror's natal porcelain. Burn Mushue spiritual jade as a jade porcelain magic weapon and store a trace of soul in it. If one day she was killed, she could retain her soul and seek a chance of survival. Logically speaking, the soul guided by Mushue spiritual jade couldn't be perceived by practitioners. But Su Li's divine awareness was too keen. Ordinary practitioners couldn't find it, but it didn't mean that she couldn't find it. What's more, the natal porcelain refined by Jin Jintian was not perfect. Mushue spiritual jade was a rare treasure that could refine the second natal body. Perhaps the purity of the spiritual jade obtained by Jin Jintian could barely meet the refining requirements, and he couldn't refine the perfect natal porcelain at all. Speaking of spiritual jade, the Sueyu tactics I practiced has long reached a certain bottleneck. Since the awakening of my talent, the body of evil ghost deduced for several months, and then I learned that I need the help of spiritual jade. However, ordinary spiritual jade has no effect. Her eyes flashed, and she took out a map made of spirit beast skin. This thing was obtained from Jin Jintian's universe ring. It was marked with the word Mushue. Jin Jintian's Mushue spiritual jade should be obtained from here. Su Li was very familiar with the terrain of Jouzhou region, and the map showed that it was not in Jouzhou region. After thinking for a moment, Su Li put away the map and flew away from Ni sect. Yan, I'm going out to do something. I'll be back in a few days. When Hua Yan heard the voice in her ear, she helplessly put down the case in her hand. She rubbed her eyebrows with a headache and smiled bitterly. Su Li was so thorough that she didn't have to do anything. Shaking her head, she buried her head in the case again. The intelligence of the holy sect's spies in the 25 sects couldn't be sloppy at all. Just a few days after Su Li left, in Jindao cult, Su Daiyin sorted out the network of the sect. It was rare for her to sit quietly in the backyard for half a day. Suddenly, a breeze swept by. Ling Qinglan, who should be in the Su family, appeared outside the courtyard. Chapter 485. Uncle Lan. Su Daiyin got up to greet him and withdrew the servants who were guarding on the side from the courtyard. Since she used the AO sword skills to kill Jin Jintian that day, she keenly sensed that Uncle Lan's mood was not quite right. She was not surprised that Ling Qinglan came alone. Ling Qinglan saw that she withdrew the maids and walked into the courtyard. He waved his hand to set a soundproof bounded domain. It seems that you already know my intention. Su Daiyin nodded slightly and asked tentatively, is it related to my AO sword skills? Where did you get this practice method? Ling Qinglan frowned and nodded. His voice was cold and solemn. It's the inheritance my father left to me when I was young, but I was too young at that time, so I only remembered vaguely. Until I was adopted by my mother and embarked on the road of cultivation, I was able to unlock the seal of the inheritance and know what happened to my father. Su Daiyin narrated with gratitude on her beautiful face, the Su family will never avenge me. If it weren't for Su Jouzhou, I would have to wait for many years to avenge my parents. After hearing this, Ling Qinglan was a little confused. The AO sword skills must belong to Su Li, but Su Daiyin's expression didn't seem to be lying. When did the AO sword skills belong to Su Daiyin's father, Jin Cheng AO? Was it possible that Jin Cheng AO was the successor of Su Li, and Su Jouzhou was fake? Ling Qinglan's pupils shrank. He thought of all the contacts with Su Jouzhou before. She was too familiar with Su Li, so she definitely had an unusual relationship with Su Li. Which one was the truth? Ling Qinglan was completely confused. But if he asked Su Jouzhou, he would inevitably be suspected of questioning. At present, although Su Jouzhou was avenging Su Li, it also seemed that she wanted to unify the Jouzhou region for her own selfish desire. Su Jouzhou, are you an enemy or a friend? Ling Qinglan sighed and restrained the complex emotions in his eyes. He left gloomily in Su Dian's puzzled eyes. Jiuli region was a region controlled by the Tianin tribe, a holy sect. Most practitioners in this region were good at incantations and poisons, and their practice methods were also quite strange. Even with the holy sect's control, the evil forces were still rampant. It was not as peaceful as the Jouzhou region. Therefore, just a few days after Su Li arrived, she witnessed several practitioners being cursed to death and robbed of their treasures. They died miserably. She was alone and a female practitioner, so she was inevitably patronized by others. However, the cultivation of these practitioners who survived by robbing was really not good. After Su Li accidentally blew up the heads of several evil practitioners, no one came to trouble her along the way. Following the guidance of the map, Su Li came to a cultivation city named Baishur. As soon as she entered the city, she saw stalls on both sides of the street selling all kinds of jade materials and shouting constantly. Su Li strolled around and saw many stalls selling Mushui spiritual jades. Although the purity was extremely low, it was absolutely impossible to see such a situation in other cultivation cities. Miss, are you curious about the sharp increase in the quality of jade in Baishur city? A kind-looking stall owner saw the surprise on Su Li's slightly immature face, and couldn't help laughing. To tell you the truth, the spiritual mine not far from Baishur city has been almost dug out. But when the bottom is seen, it has a second spring. Many rare jade materials have been dug out from it, which makes Baishur city what it is today. Su Li's eyebrows were curved, and her thick curly eyelashes trembled. She showed a simple smile on her face. Anyone who saw her would associate her with an inexperienced female disciple of a sect. Senior, why do you explain to me? I won't buy the things on your stall. As she said, she also pointed to the things on the stall with a look of disgust on her face. The stall owner's face stiffened. He thought that this little girl was really straightforward and didn't save him any face. However, he had been struggling at the bottom of the cultivation circle for hundreds of years, so he naturally wouldn't show what he thought on his face. He immediately replied with a calm smile, I see that you are dressed in extraordinary clothes, so you must have an extraordinary background. I just want to explain to you for a good karma. Don't worry about it, miss. I see. Su Li showed an expression of sudden realization. She immediately snorted and crossed her arms in front of her chest. My elder asked me to come out to gain more experience and buy some high-purity Mushui spiritual jades back by the way. But I see that the purity of Mushui spiritual jades on the stalls along the way is very low. It seems that I can only go back empty-handed. The stall owner was stunned, and then he was overjoyed. He was about to continue to find a way to get information from her, but he didn't expect that the woman was unsuspecting and directly told him her purpose. That was easy. He rubbed his hands and said with a smile, little fellow practitioner, although my cultivation is not good, I have been doing the jade business for hundreds of years. I also have a way to get the Mushui spiritual jades you want. I just don't know if your elder is nearby. Su Li's eyes suddenly lit up, and she asked with a smile, really? Of course. The stall owner nodded repeatedly, I know at a glance that you come from a famous sect. How dare I deceive you? That's great. Su Li showed a proud expression on her face, my master is busy with affairs and will come to this city in 2 days. I can do such a small thing as buying spiritual jades alone. Take me there. You will definitely benefit from it. As she said, she touched the universe ring with her fingertips and threw out a celestial stone. The stall owner was immediately surprised and delighted. He immediately put the celestial stone into the universe ring, for fear that others would see it. Thank you for your generosity, little fellow practitioner. Please come with me. As he said, he put away the stall and walked through the market to the deep alley. Su Li's eyes narrowed imperceptibly, and then she returned to her innocent appearance and followed him briskly. The stall owner sensed the footsteps behind him, and a smile appeared on his kind face. But compared with the smile just now, it was a little more gloomy. As the two went deeper, the alley became narrower and darker. After a while, the stall owner walked to the end of the alley. He suddenly turned around and looked at Su Li maliciously. Su Li's smile remained unchanged, and she looked around. "We're here. Why didn't I see the entrance?" Ha 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 ha. Hearing such a stupid question, the stall owner couldn't help but laugh ferociously. His expression was no longer kind, but full of ruthlessness. "Little fat sheep, don't blame me for being ruthless. If you want to blame someone, blame your master for not teaching you to be on guard." After that, his 5 fingers turned into claws and quickly grabbed Su Li's head. However, with his cultivation in the early stage of Yuanying realm, he could kill a little girl in Jindan realm easily. Su Li was about to restrain this person and interrogate him about the whereabouts of Mushue's spiritual jade. Suddenly, she stopped her movements and showed a flustered expression on her harmless little face. Seeing this, the stall owner didn't have any compassion, but moved faster. At this moment, a cold shout suddenly sounded behind Su Li. At the same time, a white flowing light also flew quickly to block the stall owner's sharp claws. The flowing light dissipated, and its original appearance was revealed, an ancient mirror for body protection. His good deed was disturbed, and the stall owner's eyes became gloomy. He looked behind Su Li. But he saw a slightly fat and honest young man walking over with a smile. He scolded calmly, "Old guy, the rules of Baishur City are not for decoration. Since I bumped into you, don't think about doing bad things today." Speaking of this, the honest young man smiled and showed 2 small canine teeth. When the stall owner saw the young man's face, his face suddenly changed dramatically. Why did it have to be this little devil? Damn it, my big fat sheep. He struggled in his heart. He looked at Su Li, who was at a loss and seemed to have no idea what had happened. Then he looked at the honest young man who was getting closer. "Forget it, little girl. You are lucky." The stall owner snorted coldly, flicked his sleeves and flew away. Just at the moment when he was about to leave, Su Li's clear eyes suddenly flashed a frightening black light. The stall owner only felt a chill on his neck, but he didn't care and left directly. "Tut tut." Black Lotus watched the stall owner leave and muttered, "My master is lucky, but I'm afraid you can't live for more than 3 days." After the honest young man saw the stall owner completely disappear from his sight, the smile of victory on his face immediately turned into fear. He patted his chest with lingering fear. "Fortunately, I have some reputation. Run. If he comes back, I can't beat him." With that, the honest young man ran away. Su Li smiled thoughtfully and followed him. A moment later, in a practitioner's inn. After drinking 3 bowls of tea in a row, the honest young man exhaled a long breath, as if he had discharged all the previous fear. He put down the bowl and saw Su Li staring at him. He couldn't help blushing, touched his cheek, and said, "Why are you looking at me? Although I saved your life, you don't fall in love with me at first sight, do you?" Seeing that he was so shy, Su Li couldn't help but laugh. The honest young man also seemed to feel that he was too rude. He scratched his head and said awkwardly, "Well, I like to talk nonsense since I was a child. Don't mind it." Su Li nodded and thought in her heart. The cultivation of this honest young man was only at the peak of Jindan realm, which was much worse than that of the stall owner. But the stall owner would rather give up the benefits after seeing him. Obviously, the background of this young man was not simple. Thinking of this, Su Li smiled and said, "My name is Su Jojo. Thank you for your help just now. May I know your name?" "Ha ha ha, I don't deserve your name. My name is Xianan." The honest young man stretched out his teacup and said, "I also can't stand the bad behavior of that group of people. I always want to help them when I see them. If it weren't for my good parents, I wouldn't know how many times I would have died." Speaking of this, he suddenly thought of something and said with a straight face, "Yes. I forgot to ask you. How did you accidentally fall into the trap of the evil practitioner? This is fatal." Suli sighed softly when she heard this, and her tone was a little aggrieved. "I have no experience when I go down the mountain for the first time. I wanted to do something for my master, but I didn't expect that I almost screwed it up." Alas, this sentence seemed to evoke Xian En's memory. He immediately waved his hand and comforted her. "Hey. It's nothing. Nowadays, the world is dangerous, and there are many conspiracies and tricks. Miss Su is pure and easy to be fooled. As long as you are careful in the future, you will never make the same mistake again." Suli nodded. "Thank you for enlightening me, senior fellow apprentice. I feel much better." Hearing Suli call him senior fellow apprentice, Xianen was stunned at first, and then his smile almost reached his ears. He was the youngest in the sect, and no one had ever called him senior fellow apprentice. Seeing his reaction, Suli couldn't help but smile. It seemed that she didn't need to go to Tianyik Attic for the intelligence of Jiuli region. Chapter 486. After a meal, Suli got the information she wanted from Xianen. The treasure map in Jin Jintian's hand had been broken in advance a few years ago and became a relic that everyone could go in and explore. In the first 2 years after the relic was opened, it was really a reign of terror. Xianen sighed. There are many tombs that have not been explored. Although there are many dangers, treasures and spiritual materials that are not common in the outside world can be seen everywhere. All the practitioners who thought they had a little cultivation went crazy. The drama of killing each other for treasures was staged there every day. For this reason, at least 20% of the practitioners in Jindan realm in the Jiuli region were killed. However, few practitioners above Yuanying realm died. If no one targeted them, there were many who escaped by relying on Yuanying realm. Suli heard this with interest and asked with a smile, "You said it so deeply. Have you seen it with your own eyes?" Xianen scratched his head embarrassedly. "I don't have that ability. I heard it from my father. And at that time, my father was afraid that I would run around, so he grounded me for 3 years." Speaking of this, an extremely deep fear flashed in his eyes, as if he had a lingering fear of those 2 years of closed-door reflection. "Your father is also for your own good." Suli fiddled with the wine glass in her hand. Although practitioners transcend the realm of mortals, they only have one life. If they lose their life, they will have nothing. Xianen looked at Suli in a daze and was puzzled. Wasn't she inexperienced in the world? How could she say such profound words? Suli quickly realized the whole flaw and stuck out her tongue playfully. "This is what my master said. Now I present it to the Buddha with borrowed flowers. Please don't be offended." No, I think it makes sense." The doubts in Xianen's heart dissipated, and he waved his hand. "I didn't understand my father's behavior before. Now after hearing what you said, I understand a little. It's great that junior sister can help." Suli responded with joy. Xianen saw that she looked sincere and didn't seem to be fake, and he was also moved. He completely let down his guard against her. The atmosphere was silent for a moment, and Suli broke it with a slightly shy smile. "Senior fellow apprentice, I want to go to the relic to have a look. Can you lead the way?" "This." Xianen hesitated for a moment, but when he saw the disappointment between Su Li's eyebrows, he immediately gritted his teeth and grinned. "Of course." This was the 5th year since the relic had been opened. It was no longer that dangerous. "I went there once with my father, but if you want me to take you there, you must listen to me and not run around. Otherwise, I won't be able to save you if you encounter danger." Xianen warned seriously. After Suli nodded repeatedly, the itinerary to the relics was finally settled. After that, the two of them booked a room in an inn and agreed to depart the next day. After dinner, Suli saw that Xianen's face was more excited than she pretended to be. She couldn't help laughing secretly. In the end, he was still a young man. She could see at a glance that Xianen's age was no more than 500 years old, but his cultivation could reach the peak of Jindan realm. Even if he couldn't be compared with an evildoer, he was definitely a genius at the level of Tianjiao. Shaking her head, Su Li pushed the door into the room. The moment she closed the door, the runes of the tactical matrix flowed between the cracks of the door. In the blink of an eye, the whole room was blocked. The advantage of a practitioner's inn was that every room had an isolation tactical matrix. Although the grade was not high, as long as it was not deliberately destroyed, no one would come to disturb. After checking the room and confirming that there was no hidden trap left by the innkeeper, Su Li went to the inner room and sat cross-legged on the silk futon. She waved her hand, and the shadow behind her squirmed. After a while, there was another Su Li in the room. Su Li looked at the face of her previous life and frowned, but she didn't deliberately correct it. Every time she summoned the evil ghost, it appeared with the face of the previous life. Even if she corrected it, it would return to the original appearance next time. So, she simply didn't bother to care about it. With a slight sigh, Su Li threw out a set of clothes for the evil ghost to put on. Then the evil ghost walked to the futon on the side and sat cross-legged, entering the state of enlightenment. Little Su Li, this, Black Lotus came out of the ring in surprise, and released the little white fox who had been suffocated for too long to breathe fresh air. Can the evil ghost still practice by itself? After Black Lotus asked this, Su Li couldn't help raising her eyebrows. Can't it? How is it possible? The evil ghost has no intelligence. As soon as the words came out, the evil ghost, who was still looking for the feeling, suddenly opened its eyes and looked at Black Lotus coldly. Black Lotus suddenly shivered and was horrified. He weakly explained that I am ignorant and ill-informed. Please don't take it to heart. Ho ho ho, as soon as the words came out, Su Li suddenly chuckled. Black Lotus looked back at her with a dumbfounded face, and then turned to look at the evil ghost who ignored him. Suddenly, he reacted and became angry. Su Li, are you kidding me? Su Li's smile was slightly restrained, and she said meaningfully, what did you call me? Black Lotus's scalp was numb, and he immediately gave in. Forget it. Let's not argue with a madman. That. Master, what the hell is going on? I have never seen such an evil ghost. Su Li stared at Black Lotus's face and found that his reaction didn't seem to be fake. She stopped joking and shook her head, even you don't know. How can I know? I only need to separate a trace of thought to integrate with the evil ghost, and the evil ghost will have its own intelligence. It can even act by itself, practice by itself, and comprehend the mental method and secret method by itself. As for the enlightenment of the evil ghost, it will be received by me at the moment when I withdraw that trace of thought, as if it was born to practice by itself. Is there such a good thing? Black Lotus was stunned. Isn't it equivalent to two of you practicing at the same time? With your talent, if you speed up your practice, won't it be against the natural order? It's not the same. Su Li said with pity, I have tried it. When I withdraw the enlightenment and practice of the evil ghost, I will lose half of it, which is much slower than my own practice. You should be satisfied. Black Lotus rolled his eyes, I have never seen such a good thing like you. If the previous generations of the body of evil ghost got such a talent, they would have been crazy with joy. Talent? Su Li was surprised and murmured thoughtfully, this is not my awakened talent, or, it may be part of my talent. This is not all. Black Lotus's eyes were wide open, as if his eyeballs were going to pop out. Su Li replied softly, but she didn't intend to continue to say. Black Lotus was itching in his heart, but he didn't dare to force Su Li to say it. He could only pout, put the little white fox into the ring, and sulk alone. Woo, 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 the little white fox nested in the ring space and looked at Black Lotus aggrievedly. She wanted to be with her master. Uncle Black was a big bad guy. The night passed slowly as Su Li and the evil ghost comprehended the Sueyu tactics at the same time. It was a silent night. In the morning of the next day, Xianan got up and opened the door, but he saw Su Li sitting at the table downstairs, enjoying the spiritual tea prepared by the inn. He immediately went downstairs and sat down at Su Li's table. He said embarrassedly, "Junior sister apprentice, you came earlier than me. I'm really ashamed." Su Li smiled and pushed another cup of tea to Xianan. "It's a joke. I was so excited that I didn't sleep all night. I want to see what the relics look like." Ha! Xianan couldn't help laughing. "Junior sister apprentice, you are really interesting. But when I just went down the mountain, I was almost the same as you." Black Lotus yawned in the ring space. When he heard the conversation between the two, he couldn't help but roll his eyes. "You acted so real. You are more than 2,000 years old, but you still have the nerve to pretend to be young. You dare to speak ill of the master." "I heard it all." The voice of reincarnation sounded leisurely, and Black Lotus instantly jumped up. He glared at the spirit of reincarnation mirror that suddenly appeared in the ring space. "You damn donkey, how dare you appear in front of me?" When the phantom of the little beast heard Black Lotus's words, its old face suddenly darkened. "Why do you always mention the old things?" "Tut!" Black Lotus sneered, "You still dare to show up? Aren't you afraid that Su Li still holds a grudge and grinds your bones into ashes?" The little critter shuddered, and its phantom image swayed, but it quickly stabilized. It said in a muffled voice, "Master had noticed me a long time ago, but she didn't make a move. I was completely refined by her blood. If she dies, I will be destroyed once again. In this way, she is not afraid of my betrayal at all. As long as I serve the master with all my heart and shield her from nature's mysteries, there is nothing to be afraid of." At the same time, the little beast was still a little unconfident, but its attitude still made Black Lotus gnash his teeth with hatred. "Also, my strength has recovered a little after swallowing the fragments. You and I are originally one, so it is easy for me to come here. I heard you speak ill of the master just now, and I can't turn a blind eye." As soon as the words came out, Black Lotus's face instantly darkened, and he scolded, "Come on. Hurt each other. If Su Li is angry and crazy, none of us can survive." The little beast looked at Black Lotus's collapse with a blank face, feeling wronged. What did he say? He just said what he thought. Why did Black Lotus seem to be stimulated? He didn't know that before he woke up, there was a scene where Su Li killed herself to force Black Lotus to show up. Let's not talk about the movement in the ring first. Under the guidance of Xianan, Su Li went out of the city all the way to the north. The speed was not fast. Xianan also took the opportunity to tell Su Li about the current situation of Qingshui Circle. After all, it was his duty as a senior fellow apprentice to popularize the current situation of the cultivation circle. Su Li wanted to ask in a roundabout way, but she didn't expect Xianan to be so tactful. She immediately slowed down her speed again and again. Compared with the current situation of the sects in Qingshui Circle, Mushui spiritual jade became less important. The Jiuzhou region was a place where the news was blocked. Even if she could buy a lot of information from Tianyik Attic, it was only the superficial situation. All the things about her were regarded as secrets by the sections. It was too difficult to know through Tianyik Attic. The most convenient way was to find a person who was really born in the rich and powerful circle to ask. However, with her sensitive identity, it was difficult to find a suitable person. Fortunately, when she came to find Mushue's spiritual jade this time, she really met one by chance. Chapter 487. Nowadays, the cultivation circle is led by the four holy sects, Shengtian Shrine, Ankue Valley, Huangxing Hall, and Tianhe sect. Many holy sects with deep foundations are respected. Xianan said while flying and leading the way, as if he had been in the secular world for many years and had rich experience. In fact, he just repeated what his father told him to Su Li. However, Xianan's vanity was greatly satisfied when he saw Su Li's serious listening look. Among the four holy sects, the most powerful one is Shengtian Shrine, which is inclined to the evil sect. When Xianan mentioned Shengtian Shrine, his eyes flashed with disgust, but Shengtian Shrine has survived from the ancient cultivation era to the present. I don't know how many terrible means it has accumulated, and it has a deep friendship with many old monsters of cultivation, including Fate Ancestor. Fate Ancestor? Su Li repeated, showing curiosity. Who is Fate Ancestor? Why do you mention him? You don't even know Fate Ancestor. Xianan turned his head, and his eyes widened slightly. Junior sister apprentice, how does your master popularize the common sense of the cultivation circle to you? It's too irresponsible. Su Li blinked embarrassedly. Senior fellow apprentice, to be honest, this time I sneaked out. What? Xianan said in surprise, and then rolled his eyes. He scolded angrily, the people in the cultivation circle are sinister. How can you sneak down the mountain? Fortunately, you met me. If something bad happens to you, your master and senior fellow apprentices will be worried. Su Li's beautiful eyes showed a lingering fear, and she nodded very sincerely. Senior fellow apprentice, you are right. But I have come out this time. I can't go back empty-handed, can I? Besides, I have you to accompany me. Xianan was angry and amused, but he remembered that he had sneaked down the mountain more than once many years ago. His character was lively, but his parents were calm. He didn't know whose character he took after. Forget it. Xianan waved his hand helplessly. In this case, I will be your guide for a period of cultivation. But after going to the relics, you must promise me that you will immediately go back to the sect to keep your master safe. Senior fellow apprentice, you are right. Su Li nodded repeatedly and finally calmed down Xianan's emotions. He organized his words and continued, speaking of Fate Ancestor, it is a unique title in Qingshui Circle. I heard that it has been passed down to this day, and no one knows how many people have replaced it. No one knew the specific origin of the Fate Ancestor of this generation. His cultivation was just junior emperor, but he was regarded as the leader of Qingshui Circle by many practitioners. Not because of anything else, but because he walks the Tao of heavenly secrets. Tianji. Su Li's eyes flickered slightly. She didn't say much and continued to listen. The Tao of heavenly secrets is not the same as the Tao of divination. It is a great Tao that allows one to see the destiny of a person and even the future of the entire world of cultivators. Xianan's eyes lit up. I heard from my father that not everyone can walk on the Tianji path. Those who pry into the secrets of the heavens will be punished by the heavens. If an ordinary cultivator were to cultivate the Tao of heavenly secrets, their lifespans would definitely be shortened. However, there is also a group of people with special constitutions who can live longer by cultivating the Tao of heavenly secrets. They might even be favored by the heavenly Tao. Su Li pursed her lips and saw the envy in Xianan's eyes. Be on the same side as the heavenly axiom? Wasn't that her enemy? The reason why the Fate Ancestor of this generation is respected is because of two major contributions. Xianan's voice suddenly became high-spirited. The first major contribution is that he and the great emperor of Lihan prevented the invasion of the alien realm and set up the Lihan tablet. So that outsiders could not enter, he protected the peace of Qingshui Circle for 10,000 years. The second major contribution is that he killed the daughter of luck of this generation. Su Li's pupils shrank slightly, and her voice was indeed normal. Senior fellow apprentice, what is the daughter of luck? Why did you kill her? Xianan immediately explained the daughter of luck to Su Li, and said naturally, the Fate Ancestor once said that the daughter of luck violated the natural law, and the natural law would be angry. Then, Qingshui Circle would be destroyed. How could the words of such a big shot be wrong? Look at Su Li, the daughter of luck 1,000 years ago. Because of her appearance, more than 80% of the talents of Qingshui Circle died, which led to the shortage of talents on the list of 10,000 talents. It was a great disaster. Su Li narrowed her eyes, and a black light flashed in her pupils. In the previous life, she was born in a muddle, lived in a muddle, and died in a muddle. It turned out that in the eyes of the world, it was actually her fault. By the way, Xianan suddenly clapped his hands, and subconsciously lowered his tone. Speaking of the daughter of luck, I eavesdropped on the conversation between my father and an elder 2 days ago. The fate ancestor suddenly appeared a month ago and issued a decree. The daughter of luck of the new generation appeared again. Su Li was stunned for a moment, and asked, the descendant of the ghost clan in Ghost Region? That's her. Xianan looked excited, and almost fell off the flying sword. According to the prediction of the fate ancestor, the daughter of luck of this generation is extraordinary and much more difficult to deal with than the holy girl Su. She is not only the daughter of luck, but also the taboo of the ghost clan that has long been extinct. She has the body of evil ghost, and her means are unpredictable. Now the entire Qingshui circle has issued a wanted order. As long as anyone finds the whereabouts of the descendant of the ghost clan and reports it to the truth, he will get an extremely generous reward. Su Li's face was slightly pale. Following Xianan's words, she naturally showed fear. There is such a terrible person in the cultivation circle. We practitioners should work together to kill the demon. Junior sister apprentice, you are right. Now that the chaos in the cultivation circle has just emerged, it is the time for us to show our skills. Looking at Xianan's complacent appearance, Su Li's eyes flashed with a gloomy cloud. Her lips were slightly raised, and she showed an indescribable evil intention. It turned out that her identity had been found to such a situation. If Xianan hadn't pointed it out, she would still be in the dark. If she used that identity to act again, it was likely that all her previous efforts would be in vain. Fortunately, she was delayed by Zi Sha's affairs, and she never appeared in the eyes of the holy sects again. In this way, Zi Sha was her benefactor. Su Li laughed in her heart. Black Lotus, as you said, I am a mouse that everyone in the cultivation circle wants to beat. But I am not the body of evil ghost, but the daughter of luck in the previous life. Black Lotus sensed the chill in her mind and shrank his head. He didn't dare to respond for fear of angering her. The spirit of reincarnation mirror didn't dare to say anything. Although it was an accomplice of the fate ancestor and the group of people in the previous life, it did do it after all. Ow! The little white fox lying on the side of Black Lotus pricked up its ears and looked around in confusion. Why was the master angry? Junior sister apprentice. Junior sister apprentice. Xianan's voice pulled Su Li back to reality. Su Li raised her head, and the haze in her eyes faded away instantly. She smiled sweetly. Senior fellow apprentice, I'm fine. I just listened to the strange people and things that you said, and I was lost in thought. Hey! That's all in the future. Our cultivation is still weak now. If the descendant of the ghost clan really shows up to do evil, someone will punish her. Su Li responded obediently when she heard the words, and said, my sect is not strong. I have heard of the Tianjiao list that you mentioned, but I don't know much about it. Can you explain it to me in detail? That's not difficult. Xianan waved his hand, but his finger pointed to the endless black ruins under the dark clouds ahead. However, we have already arrived at the relics. The periphery is not dangerous. Why don't we explore the periphery now? I will tell you. How about it? The smile on Su Li's face became more gentle, and her voice was crisp like the cry of an empty valley. Senior fellow apprentice, you are really a good person. Xianan was suddenly praised, and he subconsciously scratched his head. His face was slightly red, and he giggled. Jiguang sect was the second largest sect in Jiuli region. Xian Jingzhou, the lord of Jiguang sect, was a legendary cultivator in Jiuli region. Although Xian Jingzhou was the legitimate son of the previous lord of Jiguang sect, he only had ordinary low-grade spiritual root, and his cultivation speed was far less than that of his peers. The previous lord spent a lot of effort to raise his spiritual root to middle grade, but he was not as good as other outstanding disciples in the sect. In addition, Xian Jingzhou neglected cultivation and was obsessed with wine. The disciples of Jiguang sect all laughed at him in private. 1,000 years ago, the reincarnation mirror opened. Although it was a lucky chance, the danger of death was not small. The previous lord knew that his life was coming to an end, so he made up his mind to send Xian Jingzhou into the reincarnation mirror. After the bloody accident of Holy Spirit, Xian Jingzhou disappeared for decades. Everyone thought that Xian Jingzhou died in it. The previous lord was so disheartened that he didn't see his son come back until he died. But one day, Xian Jingzhou suddenly returned in an extremely powerful manner. Not only did his cultivation reach the nature's test realm, which was beyond the reach of his peers, but his combat power was also extraordinary. It was as easy as eating and drinking to crush practitioners at the same level. Therefore, relying on the loyal supporters left by his father, Xian Jingzhou became the new lord without much effort. After becoming the lord, the first thing Xian Jingzhou did was not to eliminate his opponents in the sect, but to marry an elder of a new sect in Jiuli region as his cultivation companion. And that cultivation companion was none other than Su Yu. Wanjian sect, Su Yu. Pavilion head, Wenting Shan. This move attracted the envy of countless small sects in Jiuli region, but no one dared to do anything under the power of the Jiguang sect. With the support of the Jiguang sect, the Wanjian sect quickly became stronger. A few years later, Xian Jingzhou and Su Yu's son was born. The young lord saved a young female practitioner in Baishir city and is exploring the periphery of the white stone relics with her. Hearing the report from his subordinates, Xian Jingzhou suddenly had a headache. He pinched his eyebrows and said in a deep voice, "Have you found out the origin of the female practitioner? This little rascal is really spoiled. There's never a day where he doesn't make people worry." Su Yu, who was flipping through the recent intelligence files, immediately raised her head and said softly, "Husband, I didn't hear it clearly just now. Can you say it again?" Xian Jingzhou's face trembled slightly, and he turned his head with a smile. "My wife, I'm just worried about An. What if he is deceived by a woman of unknown origin?" Su Yu rolled her eyes and ignored him, but her eyes clearly said, "Since you are sensible, I will let you go." Xian Jingzhou waved his hand to dismiss his confidant, who had been holding back hard, and smiled bitterly in his heart. It was all the sin in the reincarnation mirror that he had been trapped in for a lifetime. He sighed and tidied up the black file at hand. The 3 big words on it were particularly conspicuous. Leanly building. Chapter 488. The periphery of the white stone relics was covered with a faint mist, which covered the ruins and ancient buildings. It was so quiet that it was frightening. Suddenly, swish! Swish! 2 white streamers fell from the sky in a straight line. After the light dissipated, Su Li and Xianan appeared. "Although the danger on the periphery of the relics is low, you can't be careless. You must follow me closely." Xianan told her and looked around cautiously. His expression was not as relaxed as before. Su Li nodded slightly and followed Xianan. She narrowed her eyes and looked around. The geology of the relics was completely different from the ordinary soil outside the white stone city. It was brownish-purple like blood. From a distance, it was as black as ink, which was somewhat similar to the black stone forest. However, the fog in the black stone forest was so dark that people couldn't see their fingers. Compared with the white fog here, it was much weaker. At least at a glance, she could see many tall silhouettes through the fog. Unfortunately, Xianan didn't dare to go there. She didn't intend to expose her strength, so she could only give up for the time being. Xianan was born in an extraordinary family, and he had been practicing outside alone for many years. He slowed down his pace and took Su Li to familiarize herself with the relics. There were no surprises or dangers along the way. Although they encountered a few evil practitioners who didn't have eyes, they were solved by him quickly. A few days later, as Su Li expected, they got some waste treasures. But Xianan was still very happy, and his tense mind relaxed a lot. While he continued to explore with Su Li, he intermittently talked about the Tianjiao list of top 10,000 people. There are thousands of practitioners in the cultivation circle. There are always a small group of people who are favored by nature. They show extraordinary potential from an early age and are called the Tianjiao list of 10,000 people. The Tianjiao list of 10,000 people, as the name implies. It is the top 10,000 practitioners in a generation of Tianjiao. If they want to be on the list, they must fight for it through the Tianjiao battle. Speaking of this, Xian'en's eyes showed a sense of eagerness. Speaking of it, this Tianjiao battle is about to begin. I am only in my early 500 years old. I am still young. The top 10,000 people are too far away from me, but I can still see the world. Senior fellow apprentice, is 500 years old still young? Su Li followed Xian'en to clear the obstacles on the slope and pretended to be puzzled. Xian'en immediately rolled his eyes. He turned his head and saw Su Li with a trace of childishness on her small face. He said angrily, 500 years is considered a long time for mortals, but for us cultivators, it is but a snap of the fingers. The age limit of the list of top 10,000 people was 2,000 years old, and it was changed every 500 years. However, the last two prodigy battles were not held successfully because of the disaster brought about by the Lady of Providence. Who knows how many people were over the age limit and lost their only chance to enter the prodigy rankings. Speaking of this, expectation appeared on Xian'en's face. After 1,500 years, this Tianjiao battle will be extremely exciting. If I don't go and have a look, it will be a pity. Senior brother, even I want to go and have a look. It's a pity that I don't know if Master will bring me there after I return to the sect. She seemed to be attracted by the scene described by Xian'en, and her face was full of expectation. Xian'en laughed, Junior sister apprentice, don't worry. The Tianjiao battle is a grand event in the entire Qingshui circle. This time I will take you to find some Mushui spiritual jades and take them back. It can be regarded as making up for my mistakes. For the sake of the spiritual jades, you will have a place in the team that goes to the Xingxian mountain to watch the battle. Xian'en said with certainty. Su Li's eyes lit up, and she clapped her hands repeatedly and said, Thank you for your care, senior fellow apprentice. You are so kind. Xian'en blushed again and giggled happily. When Black Lotus heard Su Li's coquettish voice, he almost vomited out the souls that he swallowed 2 days ago. But when he saw Samsara lying on the side, he swallowed the soul nourishment back in a daze. Lord, the female practitioner accompanying the young lord is very simple. Her bone age is less than 300 years old. She is not a threat to the young lord, but her origin is unknown, and it can't be found out in a short time. She may come from another big region or be a disciple of a small sect. When Xian Jingzhou heard the words, the wrinkles on his eyebrows disappeared slightly, but he still cared about the words, unknown origin. He immediately ordered, continue to investigate, but you can slow down the speed appropriately. You should hurry to recruit practitioners for the Guling gambling battle. There is not much time left. Yes. After the confidant left, Xian Jingzhou rubbed his eyebrows, which were a little painful. His shoulders suddenly felt heavy, but he was not surprised. When he looked back and saw Su Yu, who was massaging his shoulders for him, the tenderness in his eyes rippled. Su Yu no longer looked like a tigress at the moment. There was a trace of worry on her beautiful face. Master, is this trip too risky? Xian Jingzhou's broad palm gently rested on the back of Su Yu's hand, and he shook his head firmly. The treasures in Su Li's hands have long been clearly investigated by some people. If we don't even take back the sound acquaintance, the prestige that the Linli building has built up will plummet. What's more, Xian Jingzhou's eyes darkened, Ling Qinglan and Chu Lu are still in their hands. This time, we must succeed no matter what. Su Yu was not an indecisive person. She knew the importance of this action. Although she was still extremely worried, she didn't show it. She just nodded and said, Senior fellow apprentice is ready. If the gambling battle fails, he will take action personally. But in this case, the Wanjian sect will be exposed. Senior fellow apprentice can only take people to hide in the dark. It is not good for many people to be involved. Xian Jingzhou nodded solemnly and sighed, I have secretly recruited experts who use poisonous insects. I hope it will not come to this step. A few days later, in an underground ruin on the periphery of the relics. With a muffled sound, Xianan climbed out of the pit with a dirty face. Seeing Su Li squatting by the pit, he sighed and spread out his palm. No one found this underground adytum before. There are also spiritual jades in it, but they are not Mushui spiritual jades. They are just ordinary spiritual jades. Su Li saw a few pieces of inferior spiritual jades scattered in Xianan's palm, and her shining eyes immediately dimmed. She reluctantly smiled and said, "Senior fellow apprentice, thank you for your hard work. If you really can't find it, forget it." At the same time, she was thinking in her heart whether to leave Xianan and go to the depths of the relics alone. Seeing the disappointment in her eyes, Xianan couldn't help but feel disappointed. This was the first time that he was a senior fellow apprentice, but he couldn't help much. If his strength was stronger, he might be able to take her to the relics to have a look. Xianan, who was lazy in cultivation, had the idea of working hard to cultivate again in his mind. But he couldn't become fat in one bite. It was obviously unrealistic to improve his strength now. He suppressed his anxious mind and thought for a moment. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, and he clapped his hands and said, "I got it. Let's go to Tianyik Attic," he said excitedly, and subconsciously wanted to take Su Li's hand and take her away. Su Li's eyes flickered slightly, and she stepped aside without a trace. But she looked confused. "Tianyik Attic? Why do we go to Tianyik Attic? Although they sell information there, the relics have only been open for a few years. If there is really information about Mushui spiritual jades for sale, they have been looted long ago." When Xianan heard this, he immediately forgot the doubt that Su Li dodged his action, and quickly explained, "That's different. We are going to the temporary station set up by Tianyik Attic in the white stone relics. If there is no news about Mushui spiritual jades in that place, we don't have to waste our efforts anymore. We can simply go to Huangxing Chamber of Commerce to buy them." "I see. Senior fellow apprentice, let's go quickly." Su Li's face showed hope, and then she wondered, what is Huangxing Chamber of Commerce? Is it related to Huangxing Hall? Yes. Xianan nodded and raised his hand. The flying sword was unsheathed with a clang in the air. He jumped on the flying sword and looked back with a smile. The strength of Huangxing Hall is not strong among the four-peak holy sects, but the group of old Taoist nuns do business reasonably. Huangxing Chamber of Commerce is the largest chamber of commerce in Qingshui Circle. As long as you can afford it, you can buy almost anything. Su Li called out the flying sword and showed a look of understanding. She immediately bowed slightly and said, "Thank you for solving my doubts, senior fellow apprentice. It doesn't matter. It's just a trifle. Let's go to the station and have a look." Xianan waved his hand, and the flying sword rushed into the sky with him. Su Li followed closely with a faint smile in her eyes. This brat was like a treasure trove. Every sentence of his could dig out a considerable amount of information. He was truly her lucky star. Tianyik Attic, the largest intelligence organization in Qingshui Circle. Originally, Su Li didn't know who set it up. But after Xianan showed off, she finally learned that it was left by a force called Tianqing Valley in ancient times. Although there were a large number of intelligence dealers cooperating with Tianyik Attic, and the organization was very loose, in fact, it was loose on the outside and tight on the inside. The real decision-makers of Tianyik Attic rarely showed up, and their background was even more unfathomable. Even if it was not listed among the four-peak holy sects, it was the most mysterious among all the cultivation forces in Qingshui Circle. "Little Su Li, Tianyik Attic is not as simple as this silly boy said. In my heyday, Qingshui Circle was in a mess, but this organization was still unshakable and feared by everyone. At that time, I suspected that the real origin of Tianyik Attic could be traced back to the primitive times. Black Lotus, why didn't you tell me about Tianyik Attic before?" "Well, you didn't ask me, did you?" Black Lotus was embarrassed. Fortunately, Su Li didn't probe further. She and Xianan stopped. What came into view was a temporarily built bustling market. People were coming and going, and the regular stone streets and houses looked extremely comfortable. Suli looked up and saw the iconic three big words, Tainiak Attic, engraved on the tall stone archway at the gate of the market. And below this line of three words, there was also the word, station. As Xianan said, it was a temporary station. Xianan smiled, but he secretly wiped his sweat and was anxious. He had never been here. He almost got lost after looking around the relic for a few times. Fortunately, he was lucky. I heard that the station of Tainiak Attic is very safe, and no one is allowed to fight. I hope it is true, Xianan muttered in his heart, and finally walked into the stone archway with Suli. Chapter 489. As soon as they passed through the illusory gate in the stone archway, they heard the hustle and bustle, but it was not chaotic. Suli glanced at it roughly, and then strolled with Xianan. There were stalls on both sides of the dirt and stone street. Most of the stalls were unknown objects obtained from the relics. If anyone was interested in buying, he would be pulled into a separate soundproof tactical matrix by the stall owner to talk about it in detail. In addition to the stalls, she also saw many bulletin boards erected on the roadside, which were shining with a little spiritual light. She could see all the information at a glance with the divine awareness. Most of the messages on these bulletin boards are soliciting helpers to explore the relics together. After Xianan glanced at dozens of bulletin boards, the hope in his eyes was slightly dim, but he still smiled on the surface. Let's look carefully, and we will always get something. When he said this, he suddenly narrowed his eyes and looked back abruptly, but he saw nothing. Is it an illusion? Xianan frowned, and he always felt that there was a faint feeling of peeping behind him. Senior fellow apprentice. Suli called out, and he immediately returned to his senses. He smiled as if nothing had happened. Let's go and look for it again. Suli nodded gently, and her eyes naturally drifted to the two corners behind her. There were two groups of obscure pneumas faintly locked on Xianan. They should not be the same force, and one of them had impressive strength. However, for her, there was not much difference in the strength of these two groups of people, so she didn't bother to pay attention to them. Less than half a day later, Xianan took Suli to run all over the bulletin boards. There might be news of Mushue's spiritual jade, but all of them were in the depths of the relics. Seeing that Xianan put his disappointment on his face without scheming, Suli secretly laughed in her heart, but she comforted him on the surface. Senior fellow apprentice, don't worry. I see that the news on the bulletin board is changing every day. Why don't we wait here for a few days? Maybe we will be lucky enough to meet it. That's the only way. Xianan sighed and agreed with Suli, but he didn't have much hope in his heart. He was even thinking about which branch of the Huangxing Chamber of Commerce to go to. Taking a deep breath, Xianan's eyes became firm again. There was no turning back. Since he had promised this girl that he would help her find Mushue's spiritual jade, he would definitely not break his promise. Young sect leader is still childish. The old man who secretly protected Xianan shook his head, but a smile appeared on his face. Otherwise, I will arrange a surprise for this kid. But in that case, will the master say that I spoil him too much? In the next few days, Xianan took Suli to see the bulletin board. Unfortunately, the spiritual messages in the bulletin board were changing every day, but there was no new news about Mushue's spiritual jade. Junior sister apprentice, I think, we'd better go to Huangxing Chamber of Commerce. In front of the notice board, Xianan took back his divine awareness, sighed deeply, turned his head and said. Suli was about to nod, but at this moment, a travel-worn practitioner came in a hurry. He stretched out his palm and pressed a rune into the groove of the bulletin board. Then he rushed to the next bulletin board without looking at it. Boom! A burst of light emerged on the notice board. Xianan's expression froze, and he intercepted the extra spiritual message. Spiritual light has appeared in the Gu burial grounds periphery. A top-grade numinous treasure has appeared, and there are many Gu demons. Now we are recruiting practitioners whose cultivation is not lower than Jindan realm to go together. The reward. Those who kill many Gu demons can exchange their poisonous insect cores for Mushue's spiritual jade. When Xianan saw the last line of words, his eyes suddenly brightened, and he said in surprise, "There is news, and it is in the periphery. Let's go and have a look." Su Li's eyes flickered slightly, but she also showed surprise on the surface. Then she left. Not long after, the two came to the stone archway of the station. Xianan saw a group of people gathered there from a distance, and they were surrounded by temporary wooden fences. Xianan roughly counted more than 50 people. The leading middle-aged practitioner's cultivation was not high, only hovering in the early stage of Yuanying realm. But his clothes and the flying sword in his hand revealed the fact that he had an extraordinary background. Xianan ran through this person's face in his mind, but he did not find a junior of a famous sect who matched him. However, he was only familiar with the descendants of famous sects in Jiuli region. Qingshui circle was so big, so this person probably came from other big regions after hearing the news. "Stop!" Xianan approached and was immediately stopped by two serious-looking guards. He immediately held his fist and smiled, "Fellow practitioner, we brother and sister received the news on the bulletin board, so we come to help." As soon as the words came out, the hostility in the eyes of the two guards was slightly relieved. One of them said coldly, "My master is recruiting practitioners in Jindan realm, not young masters and young ladies who come out for sightseeing. If you want to join my master's team, you must have the corresponding strength." Xianan was not annoyed when he heard the words. He took a step forward, and the pneuma of the peak of Jindan realm was undoubtedly revealed. Su Li also cooperated and revealed her cultivation in the early stage of Jindan realm. The guard's face suddenly changed, and he changed his previous indifferent attitude. He also held his fist and said pleasantly, "You too, please." Xianan nodded with a smile and entered the fence. The middle-aged practitioner in luxurious clothes immediately greeted them, "Young masters, you have reached Jindan realm at such a young age. You must have an extraordinary background. My servants really offended you just now. It doesn't matter. In the cultivation circle, the strong are respected." "I understand." Xianan waved his hand and said indifferently. The middle-aged practitioner touched the universe ring with his finger and took out two crystal-clear water-blue spiritual jades. "This is an apology gift. Please accept it, young heroes." Seeing this thing, Su Li's calm and obedient face suddenly froze. She stared at the spiritual jades in the hands of the middle-aged practitioner and slightly stimulated the Sueyu tactics in her body. Immediately, a subtle water spiritual power separated from the spiritual jades and integrated into her body. At this moment, Su Li immediately felt that the originally solid bottleneck of Jindan realm had a tendency to disintegrate, but it only disintegrated by 1/10,000th, and then it stopped. Mushue's spiritual jades were useful. Su Li's eyes changed, and she was thinking. Since Mushue's spiritual jades were useful, would the other Mu's spiritual jades of the 5 elements also be effective? Among the Mu's spiritual jades of the 5 elements, only Mushue's spiritual jades and Mushue's spiritual jades were precious. These two kinds of spiritual jades were the holy medicine for healing, and they were the raw materials of the life-melting pill and the life-melting pill. The other 3 kinds of spiritual jades were much more common. After this experiment, she had a preliminary estimate in her mind. If she wanted to break through the bottleneck of Jindan realm, she would need at least tens of thousands of spiritual jades. The production of Mushue's spiritual jades was not high, so it was obviously unrealistic to use it for practice. Xianan didn't want to accept it, but seeing Su Li's focused and very interested look, he didn't refuse after all. After taking the spiritual jades, he cupped his fists and thanked her. Mushue's spiritual jades were not precious to him. Although there were not many Mushue's spiritual jades collected by the Jiguang sect, he knew that his father's most precious treasure was much rarer than Mushue's spiritual jades. Any one of them could be worth thousands of Mushue's spiritual jades. However, if he really took those things out to exchange for Mushue's spiritual jades, he didn't know whether he could get it or not, but he would definitely be taken back by his father and put in confinement before he could reach that step, thinking of the confinement he had been in these years. Xianan shook his head hard to get rid of the strange thoughts in his mind. Then he stuffed the spiritual jades into Su Li's hands and transmitted the sound. Although I don't know this person, he is generous, humble and polite. I don't think he will go back on his words for that little reward. Junior sister apprentice, don't worry. Su Li held the spiritual jades that were still warm in her hand. She slightly pursed her lips and hesitated to transmit the sound, otherwise. I can take these 2 Mushui spiritual jades back to fool the master. I don't want you to be in danger, senior fellow apprentice. Xianan was moved, but he couldn't help laughing. He said helplessly, the mouth is short of the mouth. He said that these 2 spiritual jades are an apology gift. You really think it is an apology gift? If we leave now, we will probably be stopped. Really? Su Li's eyes showed panic. Then we don't want these spiritual jades. Let's leave quickly. Don't worry. Don't panic. Xianan pressed the spiritual jades back into Su Li's palm, blinked, and said, so many people go together. What are you afraid of? If there is really danger, we can run away. Then, okay. Su Li nodded worriedly. She lowered her head to look at the Mushui spiritual jades in her hand, and a trace of mockery flashed in her eyes. They looked for Mushui spiritual jades for only a few days, and Mushui spiritual jades came to them obediently. How could there be such a good thing in the world? What's more? She glanced back at the few practitioners who came in after them. Although they also looked like casual practitioners, the pneuma revealed by their gestures was clearly the same as that of the middle-aged practitioner. Most of the people waiting in the fence, she had actually felt it from one of the groups of people who secretly stared at Xianan. It's interesting. Since Xianan is unwilling to leave, I will see who wants to trouble him. Thinking of this, Su Li slightly raised the corner of her mouth and pretended to walk with Xianan unconsciously. Xianan obviously couldn't notice this. He just took Su Li to sit down in a place and waited patiently. When it was getting late, the number of people in the fence had reached 80. Su Li was surprised to find that the second group of people who secretly followed Xianan also sneaked in. The 2 groups of people mixed together, and no one recognized the real purpose of the other. The atmosphere was strange and harmonious. The middle-aged practitioner in luxurious clothes also frowned at the moment. The person he sent clearly only deliberately issued a commission in front of Xianan in order to lead him to come here alone. Originally, it was an accident that Su Li had never seen before, but he didn't expect that when he gathered his own people, more than 30 casual practitioners came in one after another. Judging from Xianan's reaction, they were not people of the Jiguang sect. Your Honor, there are more than 30 miscellaneous people. How should we deal with them? Some people under his command showed hesitation. The middle-aged practitioner who was originally smiling narrowed his eyes when he heard the words, and his smile became a little more casual. They are just some repulsive casual practitioners in Jindan realm. Since they broke into the hell, we can kill them together. After we kill the boy of the Xian family, we will take the benefits and leave. We don't have to stay in the Jiuli region anymore. Many people dressed as guards were shocked and bowed their heads in response. The skinny elder who had been resting on the side also opened his eyes and nodded gently. The middle-aged practitioner smiled more when he saw this. He didn't care about the guards. As long as the skinny elder agreed, it would be foolproof. Even if the rest of the people died, it didn't matter. Chapter 490. Master, it's almost time. Behind the fence, a guard beside the middle-aged cultivator whispered in a low voice. The middle-aged cultivator turned the jade ring on his thumb, walked to the center of the field, and said with a bright smile, "Everyone, it's almost time. Let's go." As soon as he finished speaking, all the practitioners who were resting stood up. One person beside the middle-aged practitioner immediately led the way. They passed through the range of the tactical matrix, and the other 80 people immediately followed. On the way, the middle-aged practitioner talked about some precautions in the burial ground of poisonous insects. You must be familiar with the burial ground of poisonous insects, but for the sake of everyone, I still have to explain. There are opportunities everywhere in the burial ground of poisonous insects. Don't let go of any poisonous insect stone. Maybe there is a precious poisonous insect in the state of tortoise. Moreover, you can kill poisonous insect demons, but you can't destroy the demonic mother. Otherwise, no one can save you. Xianan nodded repeatedly. His father once said that the white stone relics was built on a huge burial ground of poisonous insects. It was normal for there to be a small burial ground of poisonous insects in the periphery. Relying on this, he became even more confident in the operation this time. Su Li only knew a little about it. After secretly asking Xianan, a touch of understanding flashed through her eyes. This white stone relics turned out to be a burial ground of poisonous insects for cultivation. In the ancient cultivation era, poisonous insect practitioners existed. Although they were rare, each poisonous insect practitioner's means were unpredictable. They did things that ordinary people couldn't do, and the poisonous insects in their hands also had their own functions. In the reincarnation mirror, the sound acquaintance, poisonous insect tracking for miles, and poisonous soul eating she encountered were all very rare poisonous insects in the poisonous insect cultivation system. Ordinary poisonous insects simply superimposed the cultivation of poisonous insect practitioners, and their functions were very limited. Su Li still remembered that in the reincarnation mirror, she used sound acquaintance for the first time. She diverted the trouble to Yang Wei and solved a big problem for herself. Sound acquaintance was refracted in Qingshui circle, and it still had the same effect. Even if a practitioner in Zhuji realm used it, it would be difficult for a practitioner in Huashan realm to distinguish whether it was real or fake. If she got it again, it would play a greater role. Thinking of this, Su Li's eyes flashed, and she glanced around. The poisonous insect cultivation was good, but the premise was that this action was real. An hour later, the group of more than 80 people had reached the critical point between the outer and inner ring of the ruins. If they advanced a few more miles, the danger would increase by several times. Xianan looked at the desolate and lonely ruins around him. Except for their team, there was no one else. Is this really the Gu burial ground? He couldn't help but ask. The middle-aged cultivator smiled. Young hero, don't worry. If the Gu graveyard was so easy to find, it would have been dug out 2 years ago. We wouldn't have had a chance. When Xianan heard the words, he felt it was reasonable, and temporarily put down the doubts in his heart. But he was easy to deceive. Among the other 30 people, an old man in a gray robe noticed that something was wrong. His face suddenly changed, and he shouted, "Young lord, be careful. There's a killing array underground." As soon as the words came out, Xianan's pupils shrank instantly. Without saying a word, he pulled Su Li back and wanted to get away from the middle-aged practitioner. Damn it, it's the bastards of the Jiguang sect. The middle-aged cultivator's expression turned ugly. He waved his hand and shouted, "Attack." As soon as he gave the order, the practitioners dressed as guards, who had faintly formed a circle around Xianan, approached in an instant. Xianan's expression was cold. He waved one hand, and dozens of spiritual jades exploded, turning into barriers to protect the surroundings. Colorful spiritual power poured on them, and blasted in the silent mountain. At the same time, the rest of the middle-aged cultivators' subordinates had also fought with the practitioners of the Jiguang sect. In a few seconds, there were casualties. Young lord. The old man in a gray robe's face changed wildly. His white sleeves swelled in the wind and turned into a huge knife. When he slashed down, the terrifying wave that poured into the blade cut a dozen guards in front of him into dozens of pieces in the blink of an eye. Nature's test realm. When the middle-aged cultivator saw this scene, his face changed slightly. His eyes were gloomy, but he didn't panic. He said respectfully, "Elder Ghost, things have changed. Please help." The skinny old man, who was less than 6 feet tall, who had been beside him, narrowed his eyes into a line. Suddenly, he opened his eyes a little, and his figure disappeared in a flash. The old man in a gray robe was so anxious that he quickly approached Xian, and suddenly, a white claw shadow attacked him without warning, and the target was his heart. The old man in a gray robe snorted coldly. His left sleeve moved and turned into a silver round shield, blocking in front of the claw shadow. Ding! 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 The crisp sound of the 5 fingers colliding mixed into a sound. 5 black spots appeared on the silver round shield, and the entire shield was dyed black in the blink of an eye. The old man in a gray robe was moved. He immediately threw the round shield on the ground, letting it be polluted by the black and become a pile of black scrap iron. Sun Luo Claw, you are Wanxiang old demon. The old man in a gray robe's face became gloomy. The skinny old man looked at him expressionlessly, and suddenly laughed, tut tut. It turns out that you, immortal mirage blade, Qiu Zhen, are the lackey of the Jiguang sect. You really lose the face of casual practitioners. Qiu Zhen's identity was seen through, and he had a cold sweat. I was originally from the Jiguang sect. How can I lose face? But you, when did you, Wanxiang old demon, fall to the point of working for others? Hearing this, Wanxiang old demon didn't get angry but laughed. He pointed to the luxurious middle-aged practitioner and sneered maliciously, see clearly, I am just cooperating with the people of the Ghost Dom. After finishing this task, I will continue to be free. You'd better think about how to save your master. What, the Ghost Dom? Qiu Zhen's heart thumped, and he was even more anxious and worried. The Ghost Dom was famous in the Jiuli region for only recognizing money but not people. It did all kinds of bad things, but it was very slippery, which made people unable to catch it. Unexpectedly, this time, the people of the Ghost Dom actually wanted to kill the young lord. Who was against the Jiguang sect? Qiu Zhen was shocked and angry, but Wanxiang old demon stood in front of him, and he had no good way to save Xianan. Hiss. I'm in trouble. Xianan opened the universe ring and glanced at the few protective talismans left in it. He only felt a splitting headache. If he had known this earlier, he would have taken more talismans and not pretended to be a hero in front of his mother. Now, he constantly replenished the talismans, and then looked up at Qiu Zhen in the gap. Grandpa Qiu, you reminded me earlier. He knew that his father would definitely send someone to protect him secretly, but he didn't know that it was Qiu Zhen who was good at disguise. He didn't expect that the enemy was so well prepared this time, and obviously wanted to kill him. I didn't do anything bad. Who did I offend? Xianan's eyelids were twitching, and he touched a sword rune hanging on his neck from time to time. He smiled bitterly in his heart. The trump card given by his father was powerful, but it could only be used once. What he was facing now was the siege of 70 or 80 people. Crack, suddenly, a harsh cracking sound sounded. Xianan trembled in his heart, and all the talismans in his head burst into a spiritual shield. Young Lord of Jiguang sect, why are you struggling? Just let us kill you, so that we can finish our work earlier. Outside the shield, the voice of a luxurious practitioner came slowly. Xianan snorted coldly and grinned, bastards of Ghost Region, I'm very lucky. I'd like to see whether you are faster or my father is faster. Ha! Young Lord Xian is really cute. My people don't set a big tactical matrix for isolation nearby. I'm afraid that your carrier rune is useless. Xianan was sullen and didn't speak. He continued to manipulate the spiritual shield to delay time. Senior fellow apprentice, let me out, so that you can hold on for a while. Su Li suddenly said, and Xianan remembered that there was another person beside him. He immediately showed an ugly smile to Su Li, junior sister apprentice Jojo, what are you talking about? This time, I really got you into trouble. Su Li shook her head and said, if it weren't for me, you wouldn't have fallen into the trap. It's my fault. Ha ha ha, it's really a loving couple. What a touching picture. Young Lord Xian, since you like your junior sister apprentice so much, Why don't you kill yourself on the spot? Maybe I'll let her live if I'm in a good mood. The voice from the outside came again. Xianan grinned and laughed, in your dreams. You people of Ghost Region are all untrustworthy. If I believe it, am I a fool? Even if I die, I will disgust you before I die. Sword rune, open for me. As soon as he finished speaking, he touched the thumb-sized sword on his neck with one hand. In an instant, sharp and terrifying sword light rose from the top of his head, like a king descending, extremely domineering. Boom! 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 In everyone's horror, all the spiritual power and spiritual shields were shattered, turning into nourishment for the huge sword light. This is... Su Li and the middle-aged practitioner changed their faces at the same time. Qiu Zhen and Wanxiang Old Demon also stopped. Looking at the white sword light suddenly rising in the sky, they all felt a sense of fear. What method is this? At this moment, Xianan's face was pale. He clenched his teeth and stared at the huge sword rising in the air. He shouted in his heart, move. And don't use this sword rune easily unless it's a last resort. Otherwise, you will lose 800 men to kill 1,000 enemies. You must remember this. Thinking of what his father said, Xianan finally understood that his father was simply a trap for his son. I can't use any means at all, let alone kill the enemy. The huge sword in the sky did not move for a long time. The middle-aged practitioner finally came to his senses, and his face was pale. When he thought of the fear just now, he couldn't help but become angry out of shame. He sneered, our young Lord Xian is really kind-hearted. Before you die, you even put on such a big show. I will take your head. As he said, the middle-aged practitioner appeared in front of Xianan in a flash and reached out to pinch Xianan's neck. Xianan blushed and tried to avoid it. But the sword was on top of his head, which was like a mountain pressing on his body. Only his mouth could move. Young lord. Qiu Zhen's eyes widened in anger, but the Wanxiang Old Demon laughed. No matter how crazily he attacked, the Wanxiang Old Demon's incorporeal technique blocked all of his attacks, not affecting the middle-aged cultivator at all. At this critical moment, Xianan, who fell into despair, suddenly saw a white palm grab the middle-aged practitioner's wrist. Everything came to an abrupt end. He turned his eyes in amazement and tried to look at the junior sister apprentice beside him, but his eyes were blurred. Su Li's smiling face appeared in his eyes, which was fascinating. Her red lips opened slightly, and her eyes turned. Xianan, what's your father's name? Chapter 491. My father. Xianan froze for a moment, and subconsciously replied in astonishment, my father's name is Xian Jingzhou. This was not a secret. Everyone knew that he was the only son of the Lord of Jiguang sect. Su Jouzhou asked his father's name, and he subconsciously said his father's name. Ho ho, Su Li chuckled, which was as crisp as a silver bell. At the same time, she exerted force with her palm, and the wrist that was caught made the same crisp sound. The palm mixed with blood fell down. The bloody scene coupled with Su Li's gentle laughter stimulated Xianan to have goosebumps all over his body. The middle-aged practitioner had no time to be shocked or care about his broken right hand. He withdrew and retreated. What kind of power was this? His real cultivation had surpassed Yuanying realm and reached the half-step to Huashan realm. He was only a step away from being reborn. Even if he was not good enough, his hand bones would not be crushed by a little girl. Did he kick an iron plate? Who are you? The middle-aged practitioner stared at Su Li. He held his wrist that was still dripping with blood with one hand, withdrew his hand, and asked with fear. The rest of the practitioners also stopped attacking for the time being. Su Li, who was no different from a transparent person in everyone's eyes, finally showed her true face at this moment. Who am I? She raised her eyebrows and glanced at Xianan, who was still in a daze. She said with a smile, I can barely be regarded as the elder of this kid. You want to kill him, So, it's impolite not to reciprocate. The middle-aged practitioner's pupils shrank when he heard the words. Without saying a word, a blood mist burst out of his body. In the blink of an eye, his figure flew out of the sky like an arrow leaving the string. This sudden scene caused all the cultivators who were dressed as guards to be stunned, and then their expressions changed drastically. They couldn't be bothered to curse and were about to flee in all directions. Ho ho, that's not possible. Anyone who hears this, must die. Su Li's laughter echoed. She pointed in the air with her fingertips, and the giant sword above Xian An's head instantly divided into countless small swords, densely covering the entire sky. Such a movement finally alarmed Wanxiang Old Demon and Qiu Zhen, who were fighting fiercely. This is, horror flashed in Wanxiang Old Demon's eyes. He rolled up the magic treasure in his sleeves and was about to escape. But before he could escape more than 10 feet, Qiu Zhen saw that the small swords that were as fine as rain stopped for a moment and instantly changed direction, like a golden rain. Wanxiang Old Demon hurriedly raised his magic treasures to block the attacks. The crisp clanging sounds were like rain hitting banana leaves, but how could the weaker banana leaves withstand the storm? Kacha! The cracking sound rang in Wanxiang Old Demon's ears, like a death knell. He shifted his eyes, revealing a pleading expression. In the next instant, 10,000 swords pierced through his heart. Pooh! Puff! 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 Pft! Countless small swords pierced through, erasing his figure in the blink of an eye, leaving only a faint blood mist floating in the air. Qiu Zhen looked at the dead Wanxiang Old Demon in front of him and felt his body stiffen. He did not dare to move. When Su Li said those words just now, he was concentrating on fighting against the Wanxiang Old Demon, so he did not hear it. When did such a horrible evil figure come to Jiuli region? Qiu Zhen took a light breath and barely stabilized his mind. He turned his head and saw corpses everywhere. The people of Ghost region were all killed by the mysterious girl when he was in a daze. No, there is one left. He thought of the middle-aged practitioner who escaped by exploding his blood. Suddenly, a bloody flowing light flashed in the sky. Bang! The blood mist dissipated, and the figure was revealed. The middle-aged practitioner looked at Su Li with astonishment. His eyes were full of despair and despair. How can I come back? Before he finished his words, Su Li smiled slightly and slapped him into a blood mist. It was impossible for a man in the half-step of Huashan realm to escape in front of her by such an inferior means as exploding his blood. She just let him enjoy the despair after a moment of hope, and let the nightmare cast a spell on the middle-aged practitioner. Senior fellow apprentice, come back. Su Li picked up the cracked sword rune on the ground and shook it in front of Xianan. When Xianan heard the word, senior fellow apprentice, he suddenly shivered, and his dazed pupils slowly became lively. He looked at Su Li who was still smiling in front of him, and then turned his head to see the blood all over the ground, as well as Qiu Zhen and others who were also stunned. He still couldn't believe what he saw. It was like a dream. Was the person in front of him really the little junior sister apprentice who had been with him for several days? Don't call me senior fellow apprentice, Xianan swallowed, and a trace of fear flashed in his eyes. Although Su Jouzhou just took action to save him, her cruel means were really chilling. Su Li sighed when she saw this. She turned around desolately and said, I didn't mean to hide it. Since you are afraid, I will leave now. Xianan's heart trembled when he heard this. Yes, Su Jouzhou committed so many murders for him, wasn't it? What was he afraid of? Xianan, were you still a man? Don't go. I'm not afraid. He looked anxious and stepped forward to stop in front of Su Li. But he saw Su Li smiling gently and didn't look sad at all. Xianan couldn't help but smile bitterly. Although he was fooled, he felt much better after this. He immediately scratched his head and said embarrassedly, you are better than me. I can't be called senior fellow apprentice. I will call you senior sister apprentice Jouzhou in the future. Su Li nodded gently and agreed. This guy was in a daze just now, and he probably didn't hear that sentence. Young lord, at this time, Qiuzhen finally summoned up the courage to come over. Seeing Su Li looking at him, he froze and quickly saluted, Senior. I am Qiuzhen, an elder of Naiman branch of Jiguang sect. Su Li nodded slightly and said lightly, don't let others know what happened today. Otherwise, you know the consequences. Qiuzhen suddenly sweated on his forehead and nodded repeatedly. At the same time, he looked at the natural relationship between his young lord and Su Li, and he was also envious. The young lord was really lucky. Although this mysterious female practitioner's means were like the devil, she was very close to the young lord. Now the situation of Jiguang sect was not good. If this person could help, maybe the lord could be relieved. Thinking so, he retreated with Su Li. Su Li asked the nightmare to cast a spell of words binding on Qiuzhen and others without a trace, and then let them leave with Su Li. Xianan was simple-minded, but it didn't mean that Qiuzhen and others were the same. She reached out and collected the universe rings of Gui Mo and others. She took out about 30 pieces of Mushui spiritual jades from them and gave the rest to Xianan. She, who had robbed the holy sects, didn't like this little wealth. Xianan was usually disciplined very strictly. He had never seen so many spiritual stones. He immediately accepted them happily and quickly adapted to his new identity. He looked up and asked, Senior Sister Apprentice, where are we going now? Su Li picked up a Mushui spiritual jade and smiled sweetly, since this is the burial place of poisonous insects, isn't it a pity if we don't find 1 or 2 poisonous insects for cultivation? Xianan's eyes brightened when he heard the words. He laughed and said, Senior Sister Apprentice, you are right. After setting the goal, the two quickly entered the inner periphery of the relic after packing up. Qiuzhen, who followed them secretly, saw this scene and could only helplessly return to Baishir City. It was meaningless to continue to follow them. If they encountered trouble that even the female senior couldn't solve, they would not be opponents. 3 days later, Su Li and Xianan found the first burial place of poisonous insects. At the same time, they also encountered a huge centipede poisonous insect demon with a height of hundreds of meters, which set off a monstrous wind. Xianan was horrified. Su Li just pointed out a finger, and the golden lightning flashed. The centipede poisonous insect demon, which had just escaped from the burial place of poisonous insects, was burnt by the lightning before it could make trouble. Senior Sister Apprentice, do you also know the thunder method? It's so powerful. Last time, you clearly used the sword commanding skill. While Xianan was amazed, he saw Su Li's hands moved quickly. She pulled out the most essential tender meat of the centipede and put it into the universe ring. Senior Sister Apprentice, what are you doing? Su Li didn't answer. She tilted her head and looked at the east. Without saying a word, she carried Xianan and disappeared. Not long after, a group of practitioners with extraordinary pneumas came. When they saw the huge centipede poisonous insect demon, which was bigger than a mountain, they were shocked. The inner periphery of the relic was covered with white mist. The night was as cool as water. Beside the clear and quiet lake, a small isolation tactical matrix was formed by Su Li's fingers, which made Xianan's eyes full of admiration. Senior Sister Apprentice, do you also know tactical matrix? Su Li smiled and still didn't answer. She put spiritual firewood in the tactical matrix to make a fire, and then skewered the centipede meat on the bright flying sword and put it on the fire. After finishing this step, she waved her sleeve robe, and many bottles and jars appeared around her. The fragrance was overwhelming. Xianan's eyes widened. Was she going to barbecue? Senior Sister Apprentice actually used spiritual firewood of ordinary practitioners to refine elixirs to cook. This was really too fragrant. The spiritual firewood crackled. Xianan sat cross-legged beside the campfire and looked at Su Li attentively. Her hands were like flowing water, sprinkling layers of spices on the centipede meat. The fresh and tender meat glistened with oil and made a sizzling sound, and there were bursts of spiritual energy surging. How delicious was this? Xianan couldn't help swallowing his saliva. He stared at the meat skewers and was unwilling to look away. Su Li looked at it and laughed. She handed over the meat skewers that had been made in her hand. This poisonous insect demon has 2,000 years of cultivation. You eat less to avoid nosebleeds. Ah. Is there a cultivation limit for eating meat skewers? Xianan heard such a remark for the first time. He couldn't help but feel bitter, but his hands moved extremely quickly. He took the meat skewers and took a bite. Crack. It was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. In the next moment, the extremely delicious taste exploded in his mouth, turning into waves that impacted the taste buds. Xianan stared at the skewer in his hand in a daze. After a long time, he wiped his eyes, and his eyes were wet. It was delicious, and he cried. It's not delicious when it's cold. Su Li reminded him faintly. Xianan immediately came to his senses and ate up the meat skewers quickly. He even wanted to swallow his tongue. Only after one skewer, the hot spiritual power poured into his limbs and bones. Xianan only felt warm all over as if he was in a stove. His face instantly turned red, and soon he began to have nosebleeds. Su Li shook her head and laughed. Fortunately, she sprinkled some neutralizing powder. Otherwise, a centipede poisonous insect demon in nature's test, even if there was only a piece of meat, could not be borne by people in Jindan realm. Xianan covered his nose with one hand and wiped his tears with the other. Senior sister apprentice, it's so delicious, woo-woo. Chapter 492. This meat is full of nimbus, which is suitable for you to practice. Su Li reminded him, and Xianan immediately sat up straight. He ran the mental method for a moment and entered the state of meditation. Su Li saw that his breath was stable and there was no danger, so she ignored him. She took out more than 20 poisonous insect stones from the black lotus ring and cracked them one by one. The centipede poisonous insect demon was quite powerful, and the poisonous insect stone it guarded was not an ordinary one. Crack, perhaps it was a long time ago. Su Li easily cracked the first poisonous insect stone without much effort. It was scorched black and lifeless inside. Even she couldn't recognize what kind of poisonous insect it was. After all, the poisonous cultivation insects in Qingshui Circle are somewhat different from those in the reincarnation mirror. They are not only of distinct grades, but also have various functions. I can't distinguish the types of poisonous insects just by looking at the surface of the poisonous insect stone. I don't know if what I learned in the reincarnation mirror can be used to refine and drive poisonous insects. Many thoughts flashed through Su Li's mind, and the second poisonous insect stone in her hand was broken. This time, what she saw was no longer the scorched gravel, but a weak cyan turtle. The turtle's shell was triangular, like a pocket-sized mountain. It turns out to be the poisonous power insect, but I don't know which grade it is. The poisonous cultivation insects were divided into 7 grades according to grades. The first grade was the lowest, and the 7th grade was the highest, corresponding to the 7 realms of cultivation. Su Li recognized this poisonous insect, and her eyes lit up slightly. Although the poisonous power insect was not as good as the poisonous body insect among the poisonous cultivation insects, it was also a relatively rare poisonous insect. The poisonous power insect fed on demon beasts. Su Li happened to collect a lot of meat of the centipede poisonous insect demon. She took out a few pieces and threw them over. The originally slow cyan turtle immediately crawled quickly and bit the meat in its mouth, trying to swallow it. Seeing this, Su Li put it aside and smashed the remaining poisonous insect stones together. She got 3 identical cyan turtles. They looked like they were about to starve to death, and her grade couldn't be seen. Su Li threw a large piece of raw meat for the 4 little turtles to eat, and then absorbed the Mushui spiritual jade on the side. Although there was not much demon meat in the universe ring, it was the most essential part of the poisonous insect demon's body. It was enough to feed these poisonous insects for a long time. It was a silent night. In the morning of the next day, Xianan woke up from meditation. He looked inside his body and suddenly found that the originally strong Jindan had a few cracks. He might be able to break the Jindan and reach Yuanying realm after a few days of hard work. Such powerful demon meat. Xianan was speechless secretly. There was no shortage of poisonous insect demon meat in Jiuli region, but he had never heard that it could be used to make spiritual soup to assist cultivation. This was probably Su Jiuzhou's unique secret skill. Thinking that Su Jiuzhou even displayed such a precious secret skill in front of him without concealment, Xian Anxin couldn't help but feel moved. He opened his eyes and looked around. He was stunned by what he saw. Why were there 4 more turtles by the bonfire? Where did senior sister go? You're awake. Su Li's voice suddenly came from behind. Xianan was so scared that he shivered. When he turned around, he saw Su Li coming over with a few lively strange fish. You can't be too hasty in your cultivation. You ate the meat of the goo demon yesterday, so you can't eat it again today. Otherwise, you won't be able to absorb it and your foundation will be damaged. After that, Su Li put the processed fish on the shelf and continued, these fish are poisonous. You will feel a little pain after eating them, but it can erase the influence of the poisonous insect demon's meat in your body. Eat them all when they are cooked. Xianan nodded repeatedly. He glanced at the strange fish with sharp teeth in its mouth and swallowed in horror. Could poisonous fish in Jindan realm really be eaten? Although he trembled in his heart, he still trusted Su Li unconditionally and wondered how to eat them later. At this moment, buzz. 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 Several halos lit up on the surface of the 4 cyan turtles motionless by the bonfire one after another. Among them, the smallest one lit up the most halos. There were 4 halos, and the others all had 3 halos. Rank 4 poisonous insect. Xianan's eyes widened and he exclaimed, Senior sister apprentice, are these? Su Li answered softly and held up the only rank 4 poisonous insect. The little cyan turtle awkwardly rubbed against Su Li's fingertips. There was a smile on her usually indifferent face. The poisonous insect method learned in the reincarnation mirror was useful. Otherwise, these poisonous insects could not be awakened at all. They would have died when she broke the poisonous insect stone. Senior sister apprentice even knows poisonous insect method, Xianan muttered to himself and was completely absent-minded. In Jiuli region, there were many people who knew poisonous insect cultivation, but very few people really knew poisonous insect method. Even in their Jiguang sect, only a very old grand elder knew a little about it. As for himself, his understanding of poisonous insect only stopped at recognizing the poisonous insect ring. He didn't even know what poisonous insect was in Su Li's hand. Xianan was stunned, but he saw Su Li's hand move again. She picked up the other 3 rank 3 poisonous insects and softly chanted an obscure incantation. Then Xianan saw the rank 4 poisonous insect suddenly opened its mouth and swallowed the 3 rank 3 poisonous insects in one gulp. Not even a drop of blood splashed out. At the same time, the rank 4 poisonous insect exuded a mysterious pneuma. A new layer of halo shadow faintly appeared outside the halo on the surface of its body. What is this? Is the rank 4 poisonous insect going to advance? Xianan looked at it with a confused face. He could not understand what Su Li was doing. The poisonous insect's digestive ability was very strong. After a while, the pneuma of advancement disappeared. At the same time, the shadow on the surface of its body was also fixed and did not solidify. The limit of rank 4. Su Li frowned slightly for a moment, and then she was relieved. She learned the method of poisonous insect fusion from the first life of reincarnation mirror. 3 poisonous insects of the same rank could be integrated into a higher poisonous insect. The 4 poisonous insects in front of her were obviously of insufficient rank. She had made up for it with her method, which was the limit. What else could she be dissatisfied with? Thinking of this, Su Li smiled and pinched the poisonous insect in her hand. When she slightly stimulated it, she suddenly felt that her strength had improved a little, but it was not obvious. After my physical body awakened the evil ghost in Gue region, I was tempered by a lot of thunder. Most of it has broken the limit, and it is not inferior to the nature's test. The rank 4 poisonous insect is still too low for me. Su Li sighed secretly, undid the mark, and threw the poisonous power insect to Xianan, senior sister apprentice. Xianan was immediately flattered. He held the little turtle in both hands and didn't know what to say for a while. He couldn't understand why Su Jojo was so considerate to him when he and Su Jojo met by chance. From the day she killed Gue region, he could see that this woman was by no means as kind as she looked on the surface. On the contrary, she was more like a ruthless female practitioner of the evil cult. However, she was extremely gentle to him. He was not a heartless person. Such gentleness made him feel a deep pressure, which made him inexplicably frightened. Take it. Su Li had lived 2 lives. How could she not know what Xianan was thinking? She said indifferently, "This thing is useless for me. Although you can barely use it, it is also a life-saving weapon if you use it well. I broke your sword rune, so I will compensate you with another one. However, compared with the sword rune, this thing is probably of a much lower grade." Her eyes were gentle, and she looked at Xianan as if she was looking at Su Yu's stillborn son in the reincarnation mirror. She still didn't want to see the truth and falsehood in the reincarnation mirror. Some things had become her obsession. She could meet the son of Xian Jingzhou again in this life. Even if he was an enemy, she would make up for what she owed in the previous life. Although such behavior was selfish, she was selfish. Thinking of this, Su Li smiled more, but Xianan inexplicably felt a trace of bitterness, so that he couldn't bear to refuse Su Li again. He just took it and said cautiously and stupidly, "Senior sister apprentice, you are so kind to me, as good as my mother." "Your mother is very good to you?" Su Li asked casually. Xianan nodded naturally and said, "Yes. My mother is very fierce to my father, but she is very kind to me. Otherwise, I would have been caught by my father and put in confinement because of my slacking practice." Su Yu's face flashed in Su Li's mind involuntarily, and she chuckled. It turns out that the Lord of Jiguang sect is a henpecked person. "That's right." Xianan raised his head. "If my mother said to go west, my father would never dare to go east. At that time, my mother was a famous cold beauty in Jiuli region. My father tried his best to get her, so he naturally cherished her very much." Su Li nodded and didn't want to say more. She put out the bonfire, took the poisonous fish roasted on the bonfire, and handed it to Xianan. Xianan's face suddenly became bitter. 2 hours later, Xianan's eyes were dull, and he lay on the ground like a dead dog, motionless. He was sweating all over and was full of a strong stench. How could this be a little pain? It was clearly a hell that was more terrible than confinement. "Senior sister apprentice, you are too cruel. Even my father has not treated me like this." He reluctantly got up and sat up, looking at Su Li, who was absorbing Mushue's spiritual jade, with a bitter face. Then, Su Li opened her eyes and waved her sleeves. "Ah!" Xianan shouted, and then he turned into a flying man and was thrown into the lake. The stench spread, and in an instant, many fish emerged from the water with their bellies up. "Take a good bath. Your body is mixed with highly toxic, and it will take an hour to integrate into your body. If you don't take a good bath, don't blame others if you are poisoned to death later." Xianan finally swam out of the water. When he heard Su Li's words from a distance, his heart trembled fiercely. He didn't care that there were monsters in the lake, and immediately flapped his feet to take a bath. Su Li removed the tactical matrix, stood by the lake with her hands behind her back, and looked at Xianan calmly. He was protected too well by Xian Jingzhou, and he had hardly suffered. If this went on, although his talent was good, it would be difficult for him to make great achievements. If the Jiguang sect was destroyed, he would not escape death. In this case, she would be a villain and train him well. An hour later, Xianan climbed ashore with a bitter face. He put on his clothes and sat aside angrily, but he was extremely grateful to Su Li in his heart. At this moment, what was lying in his pubic region was no longer Jindan realm, but a baby carved from jade. He knew very well that if he only relied on his own practice, it would take at least 200 years to break through Yuanying realm. But with the help of his senior sister apprentice, the 200 years were shortened to a few days, and his foundation was solid, without any worries. Seeing that his childish temper was reversed, Suli couldn't help laughing. She said helplessly, "Come here, I will teach you how to use the poisonous power insect." Chapter 493. The poisonous insect method was broad and profound. If Xianan learned it all, it would take too long, and it would delay his practice. Therefore, Suli only taught him the control method. After several failures, Xianan initially controlled the poisonous power insect in just half a day. Feeling the surging power in his body, he had a lot of fun. After that, Suli took Xianan on the road again and killed several poisonous insects to feed the poisonous power insect. Several of them were killed by Xianan with the poisonous power insect. In terms of poisonous insect stones, there were a lot of gains, but there was no poisonous cultivation insect comparable to the poisonous power insect. Besides, it was troublesome to feed them, so Suli discarded them casually. In the blink of an eye, more than a month passed. Suli visited all the suspicious places in the white stone relics and gained a lot. She got nearly 3,000 Mushue spiritual jades, but this was also the limit. As for the center of the white stone relics, Suli tried to get close, but she gave up after sensing a breath that made her afraid. In this life, she was not going to take the road of poisonous insect practice. There was no need to add trouble. "Senior sister apprentice, are you leaving?" In front of the white stone city gate, Xianan looked at Suli reluctantly. Behind him, Qiu Zhen and others watched from a distance and did not dare to approach. Suli smiled calmly, "All good things must come to an end. You should go back and have a look after coming out for a long time. If I have the chance, I will visit the Jiguang sect in person. At that time, don't let me down with your cultivation. I will work hard to practice." Xianan's voice was firm, but his heart was full of bitterness. How could he not understand that Suli's words were perfunctory? Who could say when he could see her in the future? He rolled his eyes and suddenly said, "Senior sister, can you give me a summoning talisman? I won't harass you on normal days. If I encounter a danger that even my parents can't solve, at least I have." Suli bent her eyes and looked at Xianan with a faint smile. Until the latter blushed, she took out a carrier rune and put it in Xianan's palm. She chuckled and said, "This carrier rune can only be used 3 times. "Ah. 3 times?" Xianan's little face became bitter. He saw the beautiful figure in front of him suddenly drifting away like clouds, and only the voice echoed in his ears. "We will meet again if we are destined." Xianan grabbed forward but failed. He was lost and muttered to himself, "Senior sister apprentice, young master, it's time to go back." Qiu Zhen came up and said in a low voice. He was deeply moved. It had only been a month, but the young master had already reached the nascent soul stage under the guidance of that mysterious female cultivator. After a quarter of an hour, Xianan put away the reluctance on his face and returned to his former cynical appearance, but there was a little more firmness in his eyes. "Then let's go back. I want to cultivate as fast as I can." When Qiu Zhen heard this, he immediately felt very comforted. If the sect master heard this from young master, he would definitely be very happy. Who could have thought that the young lord's dislike of practicing was cured by such a coincidence? Although he knew in his heart that Xianan practiced in order to catch up with the female practitioner of the evil circle, as long as his strength became stronger, everything was fine. Schwa. The advanced spiritual boat engraved with the mark of the Jiguang sect flew into the void and gradually disappeared into the sky. A light suddenly flashed in front of the empty Baishir city gate, and Su Li's figure reappeared. She looked up at the sky lightly, and then her body flew away like an arrow leaving the bow. Tianyi City. Jiuli region was the most prosperous cultivation city under the control of the holy sect Tianyin tribe. The largest Huangxing Chamber of Commerce in Jiuli region had also taken root here for thousands of years. The cultivation trade was extremely popular. On this day, in front of the gate of Tianyi City, which was hundreds of meters high, there was a regular queue as usual. From time to time, there were some practitioners who had just come out to see the world. Looking at the tall city tower, their faces were full of amazement. On a bulletin board on the side of the city gate, a few golden characters were constantly flashing. Those below Jindan realm are not allowed to enter the city. In the front of the queue, a female practitioner in white with an ordinary face was mixed in, inconspicuous. This woman was Su Li. If she wanted spiritual jades other than Mushue's spiritual jade, the channel of the Huangxing Chamber of Commerce was useful to her. The Huangxing Chamber of Commerce in Tianyi City was the best choice. She retracted her gaze from the bulletin board and sighed slightly in her heart. The practitioners who could be regarded as the mainstay in Jiuli region only reached the standard of entering the city when they came to Tianyi City. At this moment, there was a sudden commotion behind the queue. Su Li looked back and saw a huge golden jade chariot falling from the sky. The white gauze fluttered in the wind, and the flames were flowing under the wheels. It was like a fairy chariot descending to the world. The immortal sons and goddesses of the Tianyi tribe have returned to the city. Oh my God! I can see the talents of Jiuli region with my own eyes in my lifetime. This old man's trip was not in vain. I'm so lucky. Today, I'm blessed by the immortal sons. I will immediately go back to practice in isolation to break through. Everyone was talking about it. Su Li also pretended to be excited and drowned in the crowd of practitioners. But her eyes were sober and clear. She looked coldly at the huge jade chariot floating into the city from the sky, and frowned imperceptibly. There were more than a dozen Numas in the jade chariot, and all of them had extraordinary cultivation. None of them was lower than Yuanying realm, and 2 of them had even reached Huashan realm. Huashan realm was nothing to her, so she didn't care much about it. What she really cared about were the Numas of the 2 Huashan realm, which actually reminded her of 2 old friends. Tianyin tribe, hey! I'm talking to you. Why are you in a daze? Do you still want to enter the city? The grumpy voice of the guard came into her ears. Su Li came to her sense and smiled apologetically. The guard was slightly stunned. This female practitioner didn't look good, but why was she so beautiful when she smiled? When he was in a daze, Su Li had taken the rune to enter the city from his hand and disappeared in the big tactical matrix for protecting the city, which made him feel sorry. After Su Li entered the city, she heard the noise. In her eyes, Tianyi City was almost the same as other cultivation cities. The only difference was that the roads and houses were wider and more magnificent, and the practitioners' cultivation was higher. For example, the street was as flat as a mirror, which could accommodate dozens of practitioners walking side by side. From time to time, she could see the strong practitioners sitting on the back of the demon beasts passing by. There were no practitioners setting up stalls on both sides of the street, but only beautifully decorated pavilions and shops. Su Li grabbed a casual practitioner and asked for the way. Then she knew the specific location of the Huangxing Chamber of Commerce. She immediately went into the vast crowd. Not long after, a 9-story pavilion located at the corner of the central street came into her sight. The words, Huangxing Chamber of Commerce, were outlined with purple gold, which was gorgeous and undecayed for thousands of years. The Huangxing Chamber of Commerce is so rich. Little Su Li, don't you consider going to the Huangxing Hall? After that, you will have everything. Looking at the gate of the Huangxing Chamber of Commerce, Black Lotus's eyes were shining. His old habits suddenly occurred, and he desperately urged Su Li to be a gentleman on the beam. Su Li casually plated a layer of isolation tactical matrix on the surface of the Black Lotus ring, and stepped into the gate of the pavilion. A cold and fragrant breath came to her face. At the same time, one of the handsome male practitioners in cyan clothes standing on the side of the door came out and stopped in front of Su Li. A gentle and polite smile appeared on his face. what do you want to buy? I'm Qing Shi, and I can lead the way for you. Su Li tilted her head and glanced at the female practitioners in pink clothes on the other side of the door. There was no fluctuation in her eyes. She just nodded and said, take me to see the Mu spiritual jades of the 5 elements, except for the Mushui spiritual jades. Qing Shi's eyes suddenly brightened when he heard the words. He made a gesture and said, this way, please. Although the rest of the Mu spiritual jades of the 4 elements were not as precious as the Mushui spiritual jades, they were still valuable. If he could make this business, he would not have to worry about the practice resources this month. Thinking of this, he pretended to turn around inadvertently and quietly glanced at Su Li, who looked younger than him. He felt a burst of envy in his heart. Different people had different lives. Some people were born with a golden spoon, and they didn't need to worry about the practice resources at all. People like them, who were born in poverty, had to rely on themselves to fight for the cultivation resources. Only by doing their best in the Chamber of Commerce could they get meager rewards and push forward their own cultivation. Their future was worrying. Have we arrived? Su Li suddenly asked. Qing Shi was shocked and said immediately, almost there. It's in the branch ahead. He didn't dare to have any more thoughts or show any emotions. Compared with those desperate casual practitioners who put their lives on the line, his life was good enough. At least he was born with a good appearance and could work in the safest Huangxing Chamber of Commerce in the world. Su Li naturally didn't know the thoughts of such a small figure as Qing Shi. She turned and stepped into the branch, and immediately saw rows of transparent counters made of spiritual crystals. There were rows of rare spiritual stones and spiritual jades on the counters. The varieties were quite complete. There were several pawns with the same status as Qing Shi beside the counter. They humbly introduced in a low voice in front of the practitioners who were either dressed in extraordinary clothes or looked cold and arrogant. Su Li walked to the counter and glanced at it. She immediately nodded with satisfaction. She pointed to one of the fiery red spiritual jades and said, very good. Show me the Muhua spiritual jade. As soon as she said that, Qing Shi's face suddenly showed embarrassment. Dear customer, our Huangxing Chamber of Commerce has a clear order. Before he finished his words, he was suddenly interrupted by a tender laugh. Ha ha ha, where does this bumpkin come from? She doesn't even know the rules of Huangxing Chamber of Commerce. How dare she come to the Tianzi side hall? Yutian, the threshold of your Huangxing Chamber of Commerce is too low, isn't it? This voice was not loud, but everyone present had cultivation and had sharp ears and eyes. They all heard it clearly and looked over at the same time. At this glance, many people's expressions changed slightly, and they secretly felt pity for Su Li. How could this playboy come here? In front of the counter not far in front of Su Li, a graceful and delicate female practitioner leaned on the chest of a pale young man like a little bird. Her eyes were full of charm. At the same time, the female practitioner straightened up from the young man's arms. Her eyes were like silk, which made the male practitioners around her feel hot, and the female practitioner frowned. That woman, was Yin Jiaojiao, the famous slut of the Tianin tribe? Su Li glanced at the two of them, and then turned her eyes back to the Muhua spiritual jade. She said, what is the clear order of your Huangxing Chamber of Commerce? Qing Shi's face was pale, and his lips were trembling. He transmitted the sound in secret anxiously, go away. Yin Mingyu is the only son of the first elder of our Jiuli region branch of the Chamber of Commerce. You can't offend him. Chapter 494. When Su Li heard what Qing Shi said, she raised her eyebrows slightly. Surnamed Yin, this idiot in front of her was actually a lineal descendant of Huangxing Hall. Seeing that she didn't show any sign of leaving, Qing Shi sighed in his heart and stopped persuading her. He replied in a low voice, our Chamber of Commerce has a clear order that the goods will not be sold before the transaction is completed. If you want to test the effect of the spiritual jades, you must buy them first. If there is any problem with the spiritual jades, our Chamber of Commerce will bear the responsibility. Su Li suddenly understood. There were many deceitful means in the cultivation circle. If she could test the effect of the spiritual jades for free, she had 100 ways to extract the essence of the spiritual jades without being noticed. It was reasonable for Huangxing Chamber of Commerce to avoid losses in this way. But if it wanted to implement this rule, it was absolutely impossible for a Chamber of Commerce to do so without the backing of Huangxing Hall. Otherwise, the temper of the practitioners would not be so good. Thinking of this, she touched the universe ring with her finger and took out 10 bright white spiritual stones. She put them on the counter and turned to look at Qing Shi. Is this okay? As soon as this thing came out, all the practitioners changed their faces slightly. Celestial stones. This female practitioner actually used such pure celestial stones to make a deal. It was really extravagant. Facing Su Li's inquiring eyes, Qing Shi suddenly sweated on his forehead and said, "The price you gave is enough to buy 2 Muhua spiritual jades. I will get them for you now." He saw that Su Li wore ordinary clothes and thought that she didn't have a big background. But he didn't expect that she was so generous. Her wealth was probably not inferior to Yin Yutian's. No wonder she was not flustered at all. Muhua spiritual jades were soon in Su Li's hands. Except for the first glance, she didn't look at Yin Jiaojiao again. Yin Jiaojiao, who had always been arrogant, couldn't bear it. She was so angry that her pretty face was full of anger. Her chest rose and fell violently. She pointed at Su Li and scolded, "What a lowly servant girl. Are you deaf? You don't even listen to what I said. Are you tired of living?" Yin Jiaojiao insulted the elders, which made the surrounding practitioners frown. They secretly thought that this woman was so uneducated. Many people secretly looked at Su Li to see how she would react. Sure enough, Su Li stopped and looked up at Yin Jiaojiao. Although her eyes were calm, Yin Jiaojiao felt cold. What kind of gaze was that? Yin Jiaojiao had a bad feeling in her heart. She regretted not controlling her mouth, but with so many people watching, she couldn't lose face. She immediately put her hands on her hips and continued to ridicule, "Oh, little bumpkin is angry. I can't help but pity you. You have such an ugly face and you still dare to come out and make a fool of yourself. Hurry up and get lost." As soon as she finished speaking, Su Li walked towards Yin Jiaojiao. Yin Jiaojiao's face suddenly changed, and she pulled up Yin Yutian's sleeves. Qing Shi also followed her closely. It seemed that he wanted to say something but didn't dare to persuade her. Su Li didn't stop and soon came to Yin Yutian. She waved her hand without saying a word. Yin Yutian, who had been calm, suddenly changed his expression. He was about to stop her, but he seemed to be invisible in front of Su Li. Even if he stood in front of Yin Jiaojiao, Su Li's hands still fell on Yin Jiaojiao's face. Pa! The crisp sound reverberated in the hall, and everyone was stunned. This female cultivator dared to hit Yin Jiaojiao in front of Yin Yutian? She was really tired of living. Yin Jiaojiao's face swelled up at a speed visible to the naked eye. She covered her cheek and was stunned for a moment. Then she immediately grabbed Su Li's face crazily. "Wicked girl, I want you to die." Su Li's eyes flashed with ridicule. She grabbed Yin Jiaojiao's arm with one hand and exerted a little force. Crack, the arm was broken. Vulnerable. Su Li chuckled, but it sounded like a devil's ravings to everyone. Where did this hothead come from? How dare she fight in Huangxing Chamber of Commerce? Your Excellency, you have gone too far. Yin Yutian shouted coldly. He failed to stop Su Li again and again, and his face finally became gloomy. Su Li's action was not only a slap in his face, but also a slap in the face of Huangxing Chamber of Commerce. If Su Li escaped today, he would become a big joke in Huangxing Hall, and even his father would be implicated. Su Li turned around and returned to her original place. She put her palms back in her sleeves and stared at Yin Yutian with great interest for a moment. Suddenly her lips buzzed, and a sound was transmitted into Yin Yutian's ears. You want to use Yin Jiaojiao's charming skill to achieve great success. You are not as unbearable as the rumor says. Su Li's first sentence made Yin Yutian's expression change greatly, and the second sentence made him tremble slightly. But Yin Jiaojiao's charming skill is not as simple as you think. You have been cheated by her for several months, but you didn't notice it at all. If you fool around with her for half a month, your foundation will almost be destroyed. Now you even stand up for her. It's ridiculous. Yin Yutian clenched his fists and responded secretly, is this true? Yes or no, don't you have a try? Su Li's tone was impatient. She turned around and called Qing Shi. She took out the celestial stones and said, give me Mujin spiritual jade, Mumu spiritual jade, and Mutu spiritual jade. Qing Shi glanced at Yin Yutian, whose expression kept changing, and didn't mean to stop her. He immediately nodded, took the celestial stones, and walked to the counter to operate. A fierce conflict suddenly disappeared, and there was only a little silence in the field. Seeing that there was nothing to see, the practitioners left one after another. Before leaving, they didn't forget to look at Su Li's face. Although they didn't know the content of Su Li's last sound transmission to Yin Yutian, it didn't prevent them from imagining it. This woman was not someone they could provoke. Yutian. Yin Jiaojiao covered her face and looked at Yin Yutian in astonishment. She couldn't help but cry out. Yin Yutian's words were soft and pleasant in ordinary days. But when he sensed that his foundation was depleted to only 30%, it instantly became a deadly sound. Yin Yutian's face was distorted. He thought of what he did with Yin Jiaojiao in ordinary days. He thought that this woman had completely changed her mind after following him. He even chose a low-level practice method in order not to hurt Yin Jiaojiao. But he didn't expect that the person next to him wanted his life every day. Yin Jiaojiao, you are really good. Yin Yutian took a deep breath. He was so angry that he laughed. His eyes were full of killing intent. When Yin Jiaojiao saw Yin Yutian's change of attitude, her heart skipped a beat. The grievance on her face immediately turned into panic. No, Yutian, I didn't mean to hurt you. Listen to my explanation, slap. Yin Yutian slapped Yin Jiaojiao fiercely with a ferocious look, get out. Get out. Otherwise, even if you have the support of the Tianyin tribe, I will kill you. Yin Jiaojiao finally felt Yin Yutian's determination. She didn't care that her face was beaten into a pig's head. She quickly got up and fled in panic. Seeing that Yin Jiaojiao was so straightforward, the last hope in Yin Yutian's heart was completely eliminated. He was full of bitterness. Even if he almost lost his foundation, he was still soft-hearted after all. He closed his eyes in pain. After a long time, he slowly opened his eyes, and calmness was restored in his eyes. There was no one in the Tianzi side hall. Yin Yutian pondered for a moment and called Qing Shi. Where is the female senior? The female practitioner could see through his background at a glance. She couldn't be as young as she looked. Yin Yutian guessed that she was probably a hidden senior. Qing Shi was surprised to hear the name. Senior. Although cultivators could maintain their youth forever, there was still a difference between an aged face and a truly young face. He had received many people, so he could naturally see that the female guest was truly young. At most, she was no more than 500 years old. However, since the young lord said so, he didn't dare to refute. He immediately replied respectfully. After the senior bought 4,000 Mu 4 elements spiritual jades, she left slowly. 4,000 Mu 4 elements spiritual jades. Yin Yutian was stunned, and he almost thought that he had heard it wrong. Mu 4 elements spiritual jades had no great use except for refining elixirs. Besides, the elixirs refined by Mumu spiritual jades were useful, other spiritual jades could not be sold at all. Yes. Qing Shi lowered his head and carefully added, they were all paid with celestial stones. Yin Yutian was speechless suddenly. Even if there were spiritual stones, they shouldn't be spent like this. Even with his identity, he didn't dare to be so wasteful. At this moment, he was even more convinced that the female practitioner he saw during the day was an old monster. Only an old monster could be so rich. You go back. Don't tell anyone what I asked today. Waving his hand, Yin Yutian let Qing Shi go, but a glimmer of light rose in his eyes. If he could find the senior to participate in the Guling gambling battle, alas. Why didn't I think of asking for a carrier rune from the senior? How can I find it? I'm afraid that the senior will be unhappy if I investigate without authorization. Yin Yutian regretted it. After hesitating for a long time, he finally gave up the idea of investigating Su Li. Although the Guling gambling battle was important, it was obviously not worth the loss to offend a mysterious mighty for no reason. Forget it. I'll leave this matter to my father. Before my father finishes his work, I have to make up for the deficit, so that the group of people in Huangxing Hall won't gossip. With a sigh, Yin Yutian left the matter about Su Li behind. There were 2 ends of the flower, one for each side. After Xianan returned to Jiguang's sect and showed his cultivation of Yuanying realm, he was immediately summoned by his father, Xian Jingzhou. Su Yu also put down what she was doing and hurriedly came out of the underground secret castle. I pay my respects to my parents. When Xianan came to the study and saw that his parents were both there, he quickly knelt down and saluted. Before he completely knelt down, he was helped up by Su Yu. Looking at her son who was capable and calm, her eyes suddenly turned red. With tears in her eyes, she said angrily, "Get up. You have been out for more than 2 years. You don't come back to see me." Feeling his mother's deep care, Xianan smirked, but Su Li's face flashed in his mind unconsciously. "Mom, I'm fine. You see, I have reached Yuanying realm when I came back this time." Su Yu wiped her tears and said with a smile, "Yes, my son has grown up. Your father is not as talented as you at this age. He is still struggling in Jindan realm. All right, don't make fun of me." Xian Jingzhou sat aside and watched. He couldn't stand such a scene the most. He sighed with emotion in his heart and quickly interrupted Su Yu and Xianan's affection. Seeing that Xianan and Su Yu separated, he looked serious and said solemnly, "And, since you have broken through Yuanying realm, it's time to shoulder part of the heavy burden of our Jiguang sect." Chapter 495. Xianan was refreshed when he heard the words, and his eyes lit up. "Dad, are you serious?" Xian Jingzhou smiled and stroked his beard, saying, "When did I lie to you?" "Great." Xianan was so happy that he almost jumped up. The old man standing aside shook his head and laughed. After all, the young lord was still a young man, and he couldn't hide things in his heart. "Come with me." Xian Jingzhou got up and walked into the house, and Xianan immediately followed. Su Yu smiled and watched the father and son enter the house. When the figure disappeared in her sight, the smile on her face disappeared, and her voice was faint. "Grandpa Wu, don't spread today's matter." When the old man called Grandpa Wu heard the words, several inherited disciples who competed fiercely in the sect today flashed in his mind. He immediately changed his face and whispered, "I will." Xianan followed Xian Jingzhou to the inner hall, and found that there was a different world inside, and there was a small study room. "Dad, this is," he said in surprise. Xian Jingzhou hesitated for a moment, and covered the file on the table without a trace. He said warmly, "This room is where your mother and I talk about important things in secret. There are many spies in the sect. Even if your father is the Lord, I have to be careful. Sit down." Xianan nodded, not fully understanding, and sat down obediently on the side. Xian Jingzhou turned around and pulled out a file from the bookshelf. "These are the important things and plans of our Jiguang sect in recent years. You can come here to read when you have time. Remember, these files can't be taken out of this door, otherwise you may be killed. Also, don't reveal the existence of this room. Don't tell anyone except your mother and me." Xianan's eyes were filled with horror, and he finally realized the importance. His excited mood was broken a little. He solemnly took the file and looked at it carefully. The first line that came to his eyes was, "Bloody accident of Holy Spirit." This chronicle file actually began to record after the reincarnation mirror was broken. In the 51st year of returning to the sect, I killed people and took over the position of Lord. There were still 3 remnants of the enemy at large, but in the 52nd year, I killed people. In the 53rd year, I married you, In the 54th year, I killed people. Sometimes Xianan was shocked, and sometimes his face was hot. This account was obviously written by his father, and even his mother was recorded in it. He clearly felt that in the years when his father and mother got married, even the word, murder, was written with tenderness. Xianan continued to read. In the next few decades, he spent nothing more than killing people and pacifying the Jiguang sect. He saw his father's hardships and his mother was bullied by others because of her birth. So, he simply killed her on the spot. He had never thought that so many cultivators would die in the hands of his parents, nor did he think that the cultivation world would be as cruel as others had said. He had lived a carefree and comfortable life for the past 500 years, but that was only because his parents had been supporting him from behind. His mind was shaken, and he flipped to the next page. It was no longer full of records, but only a line of scribbled words. In the 557th year, you gave birth to Lin, named Xianan. I have no regrets in this life. Xianan's lips trembled, and his eyes were wet. Then he couldn't help grinning. How lucky was he to have such parents for his son. He pursed his lips and suddenly put down the file. He walked to Xian Jingzhou and knelt down. When he looked up, there was unprecedented firmness in his eyes. "Dad, I will live up to your expectations. I will concentrate on practicing in the future and share your worries and difficulties." Seeing his son's true feelings, Xian Jingzhou's face was slightly moved, and a strange feeling that he had never felt before appeared in his heart. At this moment, he had an illusion that he was old. Well, Mayan has finally grown up. He laughed and showed a soft expression to his son for the first time. In the following days, in addition to practicing, Xianan read the files in the small study every day, and Xian Jingzhou also put all the files about the Linli building into the universe ring. Although he knew that his son could not betray him, he didn't want Xianan to step into the whirlpool for the time being. Xianan was like a sponge, quickly absorbing the important events of the Jiguang sect in the past 1,000 years, and soon saw the recent years. On this day, he opened a new file as usual, and the 4 words, Guling Gambling Battle, came into view. He, who could use the poisonous power insect at will, suddenly felt a little moved and checked it carefully. In the 1017th year, in the depths of the white stone relics, the burial ground of the immortal poisonous insect appeared. The Tianyin tribe wanted to swallow it alone. Our Jiguang sect, Yinquan sect, Shuajian sect and Shijian sect joined hands to stop it. They tied and agreed to decide the ownership of the immortal poisonous insect in the Guling Gambling Battle 5 years later. There are very few poisonous insect practitioners in the sect. The practitioners who participate in the Guling Gambling Battle must at least be in the Huashan realm. No one in our sect is qualified. So, we secretly issued a recruitment order, but no one is suitable. It's worrying. In the 1018th year, we recruited 3 suitable poisonous insect practitioners, but we refused because we were afraid of the revenge of the Tianyin tribe. In the 1019th year, we recruited a suitable poisonous insect practitioner, but we found out that he was a pawn of the Tianyin tribe and killed him. In the 1020th year, we got nothing. In the 1021st year, we got nothing. After the 1022nd year, there was still no result. Seeing this, Xianan frowned. He was now 465 years old, and the 1022nd year was this year. It was also the 5th year of the agreement, but his father still didn't find a suitable poisonous insect practitioner. It was urgent to find someone. He finally felt the pressure of his father. Not only did he have to maintain the affairs of the sect, but he also had to struggle under the internal strife of the Tianyin tribe. My cultivation is too weak. Even if I get the poisonous power insect, I can only deal with ordinary peak of Yuanying realm at most. I haven't even reached the threshold to participate. Xianan lamented in his heart. He took out a delicate carrier rune and put it in front of him. There was hesitation in his eyes. If he could invite the mysterious senior sister apprentice, he would have a great chance of winning. But if he used up a chance for this, would the senior sister apprentice have a bad impression of him? After thinking for a long time, Xianan sighed and put away the carrier rune. After all, he didn't dare to pass his thoughts into it. There are still a few months before the appointed time. Instead of disturbing the senior sister apprentice rashly, it is better to ask my father about the progress. After all, this file was written a month ago. After making up his mind, Xianan put down the file and strode away. After asking Earl Wu about the whereabouts of Xian Jingzhou, he immediately went to the hall of the sect. At this moment, Xian Jingzhou sat in the main seat of the hall. He glanced at the elders in the hall and frowned. You really can't find a suitable poisonous insect practitioner? The leading elder in a white robe shook his head and sighed bitterly. Lord, you have seen it in the past 4 years. Poisonous insect practitioners are extremely rare, and they all cherish their lives. Today, the Tianyin tribe is powerful, and there are 2 immortal sons and goddesses above our heads. There is no possibility of decline in the future. As long as the poisonous insect practitioners don't intend to leave their hometown, they will not choose to fight against it. After the elder in a white robe finished speaking, the younger elder in black clothes on his side suddenly snorted coldly, Elder Fang, you really know how to boost others' morale and belittle your own. Just because it is difficult to find a suitable one, we should stop looking for one. The elder in a white robe looked pale. When did I say that I would not look for one? If you put the idea of making fun of me into looking for a suitable person, maybe you have already found a suitable candidate. That's right. Elder Li is unforgiving, but he has made the least contribution. I don't know how he has the face to mock Elder Fang. Nonsense. When has our Elder Li ever been lazy? It is clear that you are usually lazy, and your eyes are on the ground. The 2 factions headed by Elder Fang and Elder Li quarreled in the blink of an eye. Xian Jingzhou's face was cold, and his eyebrows were twitching wildly. Finally, when the voices of the 2 parties reached a higher level, he shouted loudly, all of you, shut up. As soon as these words came out, everyone's face changed slightly in an instant. They covered their painful eardrums, and they were shocked. Lord's cultivation had improved again. The quiet place of the hall of the sect is like a vegetable market, noisy and chaotic because of you elders. What a scandal. Xian Jingzhou stood up, and his small figure blocked the candlelight behind the golden seat, which added a little pressure in everyone's eyes. But at this moment, a young man's clear voice came. I'm Xianan, Lord. Xian Jingzhou was slightly stunned, and the anger in his heart disappeared. Why did this kid come to the main hall instead of reading in the study? He looked at the people standing in the hall who were silent, and felt impatient. He waved his hand with a cold face. Go back and reflect on your mistakes. Elder Fang and Elder Li felt like being pardoned, and thought that the young lord came at the right time. They hurriedly retreated, and left in the blink of an eye. Xian Jingzhou rubbed his aching eyebrows. The 2 elders had been at odds with each other for hundreds of years. If it weren't for their good strength, he would have killed these 2 who didn't know the rules. However, there was no one in the sect. Xianan pushed the door and walked in. His shadow dragged a long trace on the ground of the hall. He looked at his father in the hall, and his irritation had not faded. He saluted respectfully. Seeing that there were no outsiders around, he straightened up and said, Father, what are you worried about? Xian Jingzhou waved his hand and didn't want to say more. He just asked, why do you come here instead of reading? Xianan straightened up and immediately replied, I read the Guling gambling battle. This year is the last year. How is the progress? Not bad. You have learned to care about the food of the sect. You have made progress. Xian Jingzhou temporarily suppressed his irritation, nodded with appreciation, and said, "It's okay to tell you about it. You have also seen the record in the file. There is no suitable person so far. If there is no candidate after 3 months, our Jiguang sect can only give up." At that time, he could only let Wen Tingshan take the risk. He was secretly nervous. Xianan was not surprised when he heard this, but he struggled more in his heart. After hesitating for a moment, he finally said, "I have a candidate on my side, and I want to hear your opinion." "On your side?" Xian Jingzhou couldn't help laughing. This kid didn't know that Qiu Zhen had secretly followed him when he was practicing outside these years. Didn't he know who he had contacted? Among them, there was not even one in the Huashan realm, let alone the poisonous insect practitioner in the Huashan realm. He was probably cheated by someone. Don't show off. You are only in the Jindan realm. How can you make friends with the poisonous insect practitioner in the Huashan realm? Don't make trouble for the sect. Chapter 496. 34 Chinese Net, in 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. Xianan was dumbfounded when his father refused. He immediately forgot Su Li's instructions and said anxiously, "Dad, I mean it. That senior sister apprentice is very kind to me, and she gave me." Xian Jingzhou interrupted him helplessly and asked, "What is your senior sister apprentice's cultivation now?" Xianan was stunned when he heard the words. Thinking of Su Li's childish face, he was confused. When they first met, the senior sister apprentice was in the early stage of Jindan realm. But later, she killed those people easily, and then killed the poisonous insect demon easily. What was her cultivation? I don't know, but, Xianan answered honestly. Xian Jingzhou suddenly felt very tired. He put on a serious face and said, "Forget it. Don't get involved in this matter. Go to practice." Xian's face turned red. He only felt that something was stuck in his heart. But seeing that his father was angry, he could only nod unwillingly and leave the hall. After Xianan left, the solemnity on Xian Jingzhou's face faded, and a haze flashed in his eyes. When the Fate Ancestor is in power, the world is so chaotic. Forget it. If I can't avoid this disaster, I won't. 2 months passed in the blink of an eye. During this time, Su Li did not go back to Zhouzhou region. She directly booked a room in a cultivation inn in Tianyi City and absorbed spiritual jades at ease. The evil ghost observed the change of the pubic region of the original body and confirmed it with Sueyu tactics. There were many spies in Zhouzhou region. Although there was also Huangxing Chamber of Commerce, it was far less convenient than Jiuli region. When she tested the most suitable spiritual jades for herself, she had to buy them on a large scale. During the 2 months, Su Li also went out for a day or two, hoping to meet the 2 familiar people with the Numa 2 days ago. Tianyi City was at the foot of the mountain of Tianin tribe, so no one dared to be presumptuous. But the Numa couldn't be traced. Su Li guessed that the 2 people should have left the city and returned to Tianin tribe. After coming to a conclusion, Su Li returned to the inn and didn't go out. The speed of refining spiritual jades increased day by day. Finally, on the last day of 2 months, the last spiritual jade was also refined. At this moment, Su Li looked over the pubic region. The essence light balls formed by thousands of spiritual jades of gold, wood, fire, and earth were flickering. Su Li controlled the first golden light ball to integrate into the black lotus-bearing essence, and the black lotus was illuminated with golden light in an instant. Su Li's eyes were shining, and her practice method flowed. She sensed the change of Sueyu tactics carefully. Since her reincarnation and cultivation, she had traveled the star path twice. After the thrilling Zhuji realm in Bizhui space, as Black Lotus said, she had no bottleneck until now when she reached the peak of Jindan realm. She only needed to stack up her spiritual power. Going forward, it was another Chuangxing path. She could already vaguely sense the existence of the Star Gate, but her feeling told her that this Chuangxing path would be more difficult than the previous 2 times. According to Black Lotus, the Gold Core realm was only for laying a solid foundation. Only after taking this step and reaching the Gold Core realm could one truly embark on the path of cultivation. As the only obstacle in front of him, the Chuangxing path would not be simple. She was not ready yet. At least, if Sueyu tactics could make another breakthrough, she would be more confident. Buzz buzz buzz, the Black Lotus, which was dyed golden, vibrated gently, and the golden jade light flowed like a magic weapon of divine light. Su Li opened her eyes, and the golden light flashed in her eyes, making a soft sound as it cut through the air. The bottleneck has been broken through to 3 out of 100, and when I use it, it has a sharp pneuma. If I use the sword intent, the power will be considerable. Mu Jin's spiritual jade is not bad. After coming to a conclusion, Su Li waited for the pneuma of the golden light ball to disappear, and immediately led the next group of spiritual jade essence into her pubic region. After half a day, all the spiritual jade essence in Su Li's hand was consumed. She got up and opened the window near the street. She looked at the bustling tourists on the street through the tactical matrix and muttered to herself. Maybe, it's not what I imagined. Mu's spiritual jades of the 5 elements were not suitable for cultivation. If she fused them with the spiritual jades of the 5 elements, she could exert 3 times more strength than usual. If she fused them with the spiritual jades of the wood element, she felt that her body was full of vitality, and she could recover quickly even if she was injured. The effect of the spiritual jades of the Mushui spiritual jade must be similar. If she fused them with the spiritual jades of the fire element, the power of the Taoist method of the fire element would be doubled. However, she didn't study the Taoist method deeply, and she didn't know how much the power of the higher-grade Taoist method could be increased. If she fused them with the spiritual jades of the earth element, her defensive power would be greatly increased, and it could also form a field similar to the gravity tactical matrix. The spiritual jades of the 5 elements had their own functions. Su Li's eyes brightened. If she had enough spiritual jades to store, these abilities could be permanently fixed. With the advancement of the Sueyu tactics, there might be other new surprises. The spiritual jades in this world are far more than the spiritual jades of the 5 elements. I need more spiritual jades. Thinking of this, Su Li went downstairs to pay the bill and went to the Huangxing Chamber of Commerce. Today, Qing Shi happened to be on duty again. Unfortunately, he was already followed by a middle-aged practitioner with white eyebrows who had an extraordinary identity. Because he was appreciated by Yin Yutian, he had changed from an ordinary manservant to a steward who specialized in serving distinguished guests. However, when he inadvertently looked back and saw Su Li's figure, his body suddenly shook. He waved his hand to find another manservant in cyan clothes and said, "This is a distinguished guest. I happen to be in a hurry. Take good care of her and don't neglect her." The manservant who was summoned was stunned when he heard the words, and then he was ecstatic. He hurriedly beckoned the middle-aged practitioner with white eyebrows to leave. The middle-aged practitioner with white eyebrows frowned slightly, but he didn't say anything and followed them casually. After all, these servants of Huangxing Hall were all very humble, and it was the same no matter who led the way. When Qing Shi saw the middle-aged practitioner leave, he immediately breathed a sigh of relief. He quickly appeared in front of Su Li before she chose the manservant, and said with a sincere smile, "Dear guest, you are here again." Su Li recognized Qing Shi, and her face was slightly relaxed. "It's you. What a coincidence. I don't want the spiritual jades of the 5 elements this time. I will buy all the rare spiritual jades of your Huangxing Hall." It was not the first time for Qing Shi to contact Su Li. Even if Su Li's request was more strange, he immediately nodded and reached out his hand. "Dear guest, this way, please. I will take you to the Tianzi Hall. If you like them, tell me the quantity, and I will arrange them immediately." Su Li also felt relieved when she heard the words, and smiled slightly. "That's good." Qing Shi's heart skipped a beat, and he hurriedly led the way in front. But he felt pity in his heart. The senior's smile was so charming, but her face was too ordinary and she was a little cold. Not long after, Qing Shi took Su Li to the Tianzi Hall last time. Su Li glanced over the counter and looked carefully. In addition to the 5 elements, the spiritual jades also had many strange attributes such as wind, thunder, yin, and yang. Su Li couldn't guess their real functions, so she simply turned her hand and took out a universe ring from her sleeve, threw it to Qing Shi, and ordered, except for the spiritual jades of the 5 elements and the ordinary spiritual jades of the 5 elements, the rest are the same as last time. Buy 1,000 of them. Qing Shi took the ring, and his divine awareness scanned it full of celestial stones. He was shocked and didn't dare to neglect. He immediately took it and was about to arrange it. But at this moment, the middle-aged practitioner with white eyebrows came in under the leadership of a manservant and bumped into him. "Huh? You are here." The middle-aged practitioner with white eyebrows narrowed his eyes, and his voice was flat, but it made Qing Shi's forehead covered with a layer of cold sweat. There were many Tianzi halls in Huangxing Hall. Why did this person appear here? He was so unlucky. Qing Shi was anxious and didn't know how to answer. When the middle-aged practitioner with white eyebrows saw Su Li in the hall, he immediately raised his eyebrows, stepped over Qing Shi, and walked in with a majestic manner. Su Li saw him, but she just didn't want to talk to him. But sensing that this person was approaching, she couldn't continue to ignore him, so she turned around and looked at him. He is so young, at most 500 years old. The middle-aged man with white eyebrows was shocked, and the famous talents of the Tianin tribe and the other 4 sects flashed in his mind, but he couldn't match them. His face immediately darkened. "Why did you steal my guide?" Qing Shi panicked when he heard it. He leaned over and knelt directly on the ground. In the astonished eyes of the ordinary manservant, he begged for mercy. "Senior, please forgive me. It was this junior who was possessed and wanted to curry favor with you, it wasn't this female guest trying to snatch you away." Su Li was puzzled. When she heard this sentence, she immediately understood what was going on. For her, it was not a trivial matter, but for Qing Shi, it was a great disaster. Thinking of this, Su Li changed her face and clenched her fists. "Fellow practitioner, this is just a misunderstanding. Although Qing Shi is not considerate, he brings convenience to me. I will compensate you on his behalf. How about that?" Seeing that Su Li was so easy to talk to, the middle-aged man with white eyebrows didn't keep a straight face anymore, and his tone eased. "I see. But since you can make the administrator of Huangxing Hall curry favor with you, you must have a distinguished identity. May I know where you work?" "I don't know you." Su Li shook her head and smiled. "I come from another big region. It is normal that you don't know me." The middle-aged man with white eyebrows nodded and turned away. Qing Shi was relieved when the matter was over. He looked at Su Li gratefully and immediately went to purchase spiritual jades for Su Li. After a while, he hurried past the warehouse with the universe ring in his hand and was about to go to the VIP room where Su Li waited. But he found a familiar figure standing in front of him. "Senior." Qing Shi's face turned pale when he saw the middle-aged man with white eyebrows blocking the door. The middle-aged man with white eyebrows chuckled and flicked his fingers. A white poisonous insect flew into Qing Shi's eyebrows. Qing Shi's smart eyes instantly became dull, and he said, "I don't know the origin of that female guest. I only know that she is as rich as a country. Young lord calls her senior, but her bone age is very young." When the middle-aged man with white eyebrows heard the words, "as rich as a country," he felt ridiculous. "You are just a slave who has never seen the world. The wealth of a cultivation country is equal to that of a whole top-grade sect. She is just a first-rank female practitioner." He glanced at the universe ring in Qing Shi's hand and directly grabbed it. He scanned it with his divine awareness, and his disdainful look changed instantly. So many. Countless celestial stones. He had never seen so many celestial stones. These celestial stones are enough for me to practice to pass nature's test. He gasped twice, and his heart beat violently. At this moment, the greed instantly drowned the reason in his eyes, and a fierce light flashed in his eyes. In the VIP room, Suli was still meditating. Suddenly, she was awakened by a messy footstep. When she looked up, she immediately saw a flustered manservant in indigo clothes. She held back her tears and said, "Senior, something happened." You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.